About 9 o'clock. Welcome to the Deschutes County Board of Commissioners meeting. This is for 9 a.m. Wednesday, August 6th, 2025. First item on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. It says we're in recess.
There we go. I saw the audio was going, but I think we're good now.
Okay.
Okay, so at this time, citizen input for items that are not on the agenda. So we have a request from Mr. or Mrs. Shauna Snyder. Up, Sean. Yeah, you're setting the pace today. Thank you very much. No rush.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Snyder.
Sean, okay.
Everybody here.
Please just speak to the Board of Commissioners here. This is your opportunity to speak on any item that's not on the agenda.
So I'll get to it. Once again, my name is Sean. Living at the Cleveland Commons. People here know where this place is. Several $1 million went into this building, this amazing place. And it's been, it's brand spanking new. Sure you guys know. Although you wouldn't really believe it if you've seen it, because it's being destroyed on the daily. Bear with me as we speak off my mind. I don't always read off a piece of paper. Okay, here. Daily. Why, you ask? Because complete disrespectful drug addicts and alcoholics have been welcomed through mismanagement. Who is Cascade Management? Who is Housing Works? Who is Epic Property Management? Who is Neighborhood Impact? Who is Thrive? Who is Reach? Etc., etc., etc. Why is there so many hands involved, but yet our homeless drug problem is a huge shit show? Excuse my language. I know why, because everyone on board is red or blue, and the rest of us are stuck in the middle of a bullshit match. Newsflash, I, Sean Snyder, am now on scene. My tank is full and my brakes are metal to metal, so there's no stopping. It's only full steam ahead at this point. I hope I make that clear. The challenges I had to overcome to change the rules and regulations in Yosemite National Park, Joshua Tree National Park, and our local shit show Smith Rock State Park will make this mission of mine duck soup. Trust and believe it. My door is open to any taxpayer here in the audience or in front of me who would like to come to the Cleveland Commons and hang out and see for yourselves and not believe the nonsense that is going on the daily. One last thing. I used the restroom downstairs before I came in. We all know that the blue was behind installing the tampons in the men's bathroom downstairs. Just imagine if you would just men's room and solving the shit show we call the homeless problem here.
Thank you, Mr.
Probably
Snyder.
Immediate.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for coming in, Sean.
I guess I'd just say, Mr. Snyder, if you have specific instances of rules being violated at Cleveland Commons, I would encourage you to document it and report it to the management there, and B, CC us so we can follow it.
being done is why my third option was to come here today, sir. So thank you for acknowledging that.
Yeah, please CC us when you, if you've done this in writing, I'd encourage you to forward that to us so that we can follow up.
Thank you. Is there anyone else for citizen input for items not on the agenda? Is there anyone online with a raised hand feature? Okay, so seeing none at this time. Oh, yeah, other item, yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to acknowledge our community stepping up for Stephen Peoples. He's actually a local talent that was struck with pancreatitis a couple weeks ago. The fact that he's still alive and still fighting, I think, is a testament to his strength. But if Central Oregon Daily actually was running the story this morning early, I saw it on the news. And if you could go see the story and just do something to support him, that he can make it out. It was amazing. He won the bareback riding for the professional rodeo cowboys a couple years ago. And it was always great seeing him drive his truck around that said, champion. And he definitely is a champion. And I'm just hoping that his strength will pull him through.
Thank you very much. Anything else this morning? Okay, so at this time, consent agenda. We have 8 items or so, 8 items.
So move. I just had one word. I said LA County had, probably I said commissioners. They actually have supervisors, but they're commissioners. Anyway, for their 10 million people, the 5
One
commissioners.
correction in the minutes.
Yeah, that was it.
So that was motion.
Yes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Adair,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and Chair will vote yes. Item number 9, request to add FTE for assistant planner position. Community development.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Peter Gutowski, Community Development Director, joined by Will Groves, our planning manager. The Community Development Department is respectfully asking the board's support to bring on an FTE for an assistant planner. As noted in the memorandum, the Community Development Department is preparing for some succession. One of our administrative assistants is going to be retiring in about 17 months. There are duties that an assistant planner, once they're onboarded, can provide for addressing. And in addition, as Will can speak in more detail, an assistant planner will give us more bandwidth to as it pertains to basic level responsibilities within the planning division, staffing the counter, coordinating pre-application meetings, dealing with customer questions and some basic level applications. The Land Use Planning Division is seeing steady land use applications. We also have some staff that have been on FMLA and some that are going on FMLA in an exciting way. This just gives us a little bit more capacity to stay on top of our responsibilities as it pertains to the current planning section. So it's not a huge amount in terms of our budget, and we can easily absorb it. So
Well, this is right after we did pass our annual budget, so this is adding the FTE.
that's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioners. Will Groves, your planning manager, and just want to reiterate what Director Gutowski was speaking to in that, again, succession planning is a big deal here. Trying to make sure Tracy Griffin, of course, has indicated that she's anticipating announcing a retirement date, well deserved, and we want to make sure that we have the continuity for addressing. Addressing is a service that we provide to a variety of our communities and as well as Deschutes County generally. And it comes with some really unusual requirements for special types of development that don't come up that often. And so we really want to maximize our training overlap. Tracy has decades of experience with us, and we want to make sure that we're not losing that in the transition. And addressing is you wouldn't think of it as this, but it's a very important part of smoothly getting people from wanting a building permit to having a building permit. If there's not an address, it's really hard to get the rest of the paper to move properly. So a big deal. Also, we've seen increased demand. We've been running very lean. You'll recall that in recent years we've had to go through layoffs, and since then we've been playing our staffing strategy very conservatively. And the downside of that is that minor upticks in work can result in slowdowns for both in terms of our responsiveness to calls, emails, getting back to people on the counter, as well as permitting. And so given that the budget at the moment appears good, we'd like to bring back those service capacities so that when we do see upticks in work, that we don't see delays in service provision, and believe that this is an appropriate level to do this at. Also, we don't currently have assistant planners as part of our layoffs. We had to lay off our assistant planners. That's our junior level of staff. And, it's both our cheapest staff member to operate, as well as kind of our backup team to build future staffing capacity out of. And so having someone getting trained at that level ensures that if anyone who else is on our staff takes an opportunity someplace else or needs to move out of town, that we have ready to go resources to provide those services to the community. So definitely resiliency, continuity, and both a forecasted and present need for this position.
So I'm so part of this position. It's good to know that we are aiming to keep up the capacity. It is interesting times because it's down a little bit, but maybe it's going to be up, and tomorrow you never know what's going to happen. So it's very dicey on even making some of these decisions. And also, we want those fees and revenue that are associated to cover these costs also. I still do have conversations with a few builders that I think they're in that transition time where electronic system is putting in an application and there's maybe a delay, and then they're getting a response saying it's not complete. And some people are really struggling. Maybe it's just the technology and the history of how we used to do things. So I think there's a little transition there also. But yeah, I'd be supportive of this.
My impression is that in the last year, 18 months, 2 years, CDD has tried to budget very cautiously and responsibly, to live within its means, to still provide the level of staffing that the community expects from us, and the service levels that the community expects from us. And I believe that is why we are in a position, that responsible and cautious budgeting is why we're in the position right now to be able to do this. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Chang, thank you for making those remarks. As Will mentioned it as well, we have been judicious in our budgeting for several years, and had to make some difficult decisions a few years ago. It has led, thanks to the budget committee and the board support, for some modest fee increases, and kind of right sizing our staffing with these fee increases. We've been able to maintain current service levels to meet the needs of our design professionals, your constituents. And we're just at a point now where we're trying to be nimble, recognizing that in a year and a half, we're going to be dealing with a significant loss in staff with institutional knowledge, and the addressing piece is a big component to that. We're still going to fill the administrative assistant position, but this is an opportunity to take advantage of our fiscal situation in a way that is responsible and maintains our accountability to our customers. So your points are well stated, and I greatly appreciate those observations.
Yeah. My question is, so a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at the work plan for the planning division. And there were a number of projects that that were priorities for us. There's always more priorities than there are human resources. And there were things that we had, in some cases had to put off for quite a long time. And I was pleased that we were able to take on as many priorities as we stated we planned to when we approved that work plan. Does this, I know current planning, long range planning are different functions, but I believe that there's been people who are cross training right now. Will the addition of this position also help ensure that some of those long range planning projects get completed in a timely fashion?
Definitely. So just to your point, we have current and long range planners who generally work on different types of files, but many of our long range planners had originally been current planners, and we've used them in times of current planning demand. So that's, applications where people are showing up looking to build something, in the short term. And when we've had surges to try and keep those lines down, we've taken long range planners, as we've come to discuss with you in the past, and allocated their resources to keep that line of applications down. And so to the extent that we have this assistant planner in current planning, that line will be somewhat shortened, and thus the chance that we need to allocate long range planners to current planning projects is less. Thus, we have more long range planning throughput, and the chance that we get at some of these projects expeditiously is increased.
Great. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, many of those projects, dealing with wildfire resiliency, dealing with long-term community goals like, a revision of our outdoor lighting, regulations. There were a lot of really important priorities in there, and it makes me extra happy to know that this position will help us make sure that those things get across the finish line.
Gosh, what can I say on top of all that? No, we always, I heard about when I first started, one time we lost a couple people that had tremendous counter knowledge. People could come in, they could get something stamped, and they called me and they said, Patty, why aren't you thinking of, institutional knowledge and keeping that? So if we could at least have 15 months together with this new person working and grabbing as much institutional knowledge, I do think it's important. The more successful our building department is, the happier our community is, perhaps. So anyway, I thank you for coming and realizing that thinking ahead is really important here.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll move approval to add 1.0 FTE assistant planner position to the community development department.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Adair,
Yes,
and Chair will vote yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
hopefully interest rates will go down a bit and then you guys can get a lot busier.
Mm-hmm. Next item is item number 10, public hearing for Mackenzie Meadow Village Comp Plan Amendment Zone Change Request. So this is the time and place set for a hearing regarding file number 24724-839PA840ZC concerning a request for a comprehensive plan amendment and zone change for approximately 58 acres adjacent to the City of Sisters. Staff will outline the hearing procedures that will be followed. No rush, I just getting this started here.
Thank you, Chair DeBonne. I get my screen share up going here. Again, good morning, Commissioners. For the record, my name is Hallie King, and I'm a senior planner with Deschutes County Community Development. As Chair DeBonne said, today the Board of County Commissioners will take testimony and receive written and oral evidence concerning a quasi-judicial application requesting approval of a plan amendment zone change for 58 acres adjacent to the City of Sisters. The property owner and applicant is Mackenzie Meadow Village, LLC. First, I'm going to go through the process for today's hearing. Again, I'm going to explain how the folks in attendance and the public can testify this morning, followed by a brief staff report on the application. Then we'll move into the testimony portion where the applicant will go first, and they will have 30 minutes for their presentation. If there's any agencies in attendance, they will go next and they will have 10 minutes. Then those attending who'd like to testify in support will go and they'll have 3 minutes. Any in opposition, also again, 3 minutes per person. And then anyone neutral to the application as well will have 3 minutes. Then the applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal for 10 minutes. And then staff will have any closing comments. Just to note that the board can eliminate or modify time limits at their discretion. So this hearing is being conducted both remote and in person. We do ask for everyone attending before starting your testimony, please provide your first and last name, as well as your mailing address. And this is to ensure we have your contact information for future notices and or decisions on this matter. For those here in person, please fill out a blue sign-up sheet by the front doors of the room and submit it to staff. And then Chair DeBone will call up each individual to invite them up to the front of the room to provide their testimony. For those joining us remotely, you must be logged into the meeting using the Zoom link provided in the notice of public hearing and on the board's agenda. The meeting's also being live streamed via YouTube, but just note, if you'd like to participate, you will need to log in using the Zoom link, or you can dial in. I've got that phone number here on the screen. Again, it's also on the board's meeting page as well. And so for those joining on Zoom, when we get to that portion, you'll use the raise hand button on your computer to signal that you would like to provide testimony. If you are dialing in, you will enter in *9 to raise your hand. In addition to any oral testimony today, folks are welcome to submit written testimony. Again, if you're in person, you can hand it to myself, or for joining us remotely, my email is up here on the screen. We do ask that everyone we want to run an orderly and respectful hearing. Staff and the commissioners will, ask folks to address the commissioners and anyone that's, not orderly may be asked to leave the hearing. And at this time, I want to turn it back to the chair for any commissioner disclosures.
Does any commissioner have anything to disclose? And if so, please state the nature of same and whether you can proceed.
Well, I'll just state for the record that prior to the submission of this application, I had a couple of discussions with Bill Willits about the urban growth boundary expansion process, which is separate from this application, but has some linkages, and also about Mr. Willits's initial ideas about how the land might be used if it was rezoned. I do not, that was again prior to the application being submitted. I was very clear that, at the point where it was getting close to submittal of an application, we couldn't talk about this property and this application anymore. So I believe I can proceed.
Thank you.
And I do want to disclose, I do live in Sisters. I usually get the Nugget, and I've read a lot of articles in the Nugget on it, but I believe I can proceed.
And for myself, yeah, Mr. Willits reached out to me. We sat down and he explained some things, and pretty quick, I'm like, oh, stand by, this could come in front of us. So, but there was an effort, and we did sit down and speak. And then, as I say, there's relationships here in the room. After we did our work session, I drove the neighborhood just south of this, I think is kind of saw the stubbed roads and some ideas over there. So as I say, UGB is different than this process, but just doing a little bit of homework. And I even called Mr. Kohlberg, and because I noticed the last name is on one of these cross streets over there. So we spoke a little. As I say, just relationships and communication. No direct or conflict for myself per se. So I do feel like I can proceed. Just doing a little homework. So does any party wish to challenge any commissioner member of this hearings body based on ex parte contacts, biases, or conflicts. So I do respect that we're trying to have a very, procedurally correct meeting here today. Is there anyone online with the raised hand feature? And as there are no challenges presented prior to opening this hearing, does anyone have procedural objections to the public hearing? Sorry, I was getting ahead of myself, but all these steps. Anyone online with the raised hand feature? So seeing none, the hearing is now open. Staff will proceed with a brief staff report.
Thank you, Chair DeBonne. So again, the subject property that has been submitted for this application is 58 acres outlined here in red on the screen. It is directly north of City of Sisters city limits and the current urban growth boundary. The Tollgate residential subdivision is located to the northwest. The Deschutes National Forest, federally owned forest lands, are located directly east, and directly west is the Trout Creek Conservation Area owned by the Sisters School District. The property contains 4 tax lots. One of the tax lots is the existing McKinney Ranch Road, which is a private right-of-way, and three other tax lots there on your screen. I've got a existing zoning map here just to kind of have for context. I've also included some additional maps in the commissioner's packets, a little bit more detailed zoning zoomed out. Again, the light green on the screen is the F1 zone, forest use 1 zone. The dark green, which is the subject property, is zoned forest use 2. Red is rural residential. Again, in that top left corner is the Tollgate subdivision. And then obviously directly south is City of Sisters urban zoning. This also shows the landscape management overlay associated with Highway 20 in blue. That blue hatch, you can see it touches the northeast corners of the subject property. So again, the applicant's request is a comprehensive plan amendment to change the designation from forest to rural residential exception area, and a corresponding zone change from forest use 2 to multiple use agriculture, MUA 10. The application includes a goal 4 exception request, which I'll touch on a little bit more in detail as I move through the presentation. There's no physical development proposed with this application. And as we've touched on, there's no concurrent UGB expansion with this application. The process up until this point, this application was heard at an initial hearing in April by Deschutes County Hearings Officer with a recommendation for approval issued on June 25th. We saw extensive public participation during that process with both comments in support and in opposition. Those in support reference, the ongoing UGB expansion process occurring with the City of Sisters and the potential for this property, to be brought in and its location adjacent to the city and existing infrastructure and possible future housing opportunities. Those in opposition had concerns with impacts to wildlife, wildfire risk, the Trout Creek corridor impacts to that flows through the subject property, general growth concerns with traffic, and also groundwater availability. As discussed at the work session, we did receive agency comments from Department of Land Conservation and Development, as well as City of Sisters, City Council, and Planning Commission that participated in that process. I want to touch briefly on the goal 4 exception, as that is something that we don't see often with our plan amendment zone changes that come through the county. And essentially, there are two main ways that a county can justify a decision to allow non-resource use of land that's designated as resource use, which this one is. One is to make the assertion that the subject property is not an agricultural land or is not forest lands. And we've seen that with many of our other PAZCs that make the argument that a property is not farmable and therefore those goals should not apply. And then the other process is basically to take an exception to that goal, which is what this application is proposing. And the exception process essentially is where, there may be unique circumstances that warrant a local override of the statewide goal. This particular exception request is called the reasons exception request. That's sort of the shorthand name for it. There's a few other exception pathways. One that's called the irrevocably committed or physically developed exception, which pertains to if a property has been developed basically to be taken out of resource use. Again, those are not being reviewed with this application. This is the specific exception process. And again, it's called the reasons. And these are the four, I've sort of shorthanded these from the statute to just show the 4 points that an applicant has to show. So again, first one is that there are reasons that justify why the state policy embodied in the goal should not apply. And the particular goal would be Goal 4, forest lands. The applicant has to demonstrate that areas that do not require a new exception cannot reasonably accommodate the use. Third is that the long-term environmental, economic, social, and energy consequences resulting from the use are not significantly more adverse than would result from the same proposal located in areas requiring a goal exception. And lastly, that the proposed uses are compatible with other adjacent uses or will be rendered so through, mitigation measures. Some key considerations coming out of the hearings officer decision or recommendation was that the hearings officer found the applicant can show compliance with the first OAR, which is called the catch-all provision in regards to the goal exception. There is an additional set of standards that have specific uses identified, one of those being rural, residential, and industrial. But again, the hearings officer found that the applicant can show compliance with either. And so in this case, they demonstrated compliance with essentially the catch-all provision, as it wasn't a specific development proposal with this application. The second piece is based on the language of statute. The applicant can rely on other reasons to justify the goal exception other than need and locational components. And that is due to the language of the code, which is underlined here. So just wanted to touch on some of the findings of the hearings officer. Certainly if the applicant wants to go into greater detail on that, they're welcome to. Moving through, I wanted to just briefly circle back to the work session that we had with the board on July 29th. There was a request for additional zoning maps, which we provided in the packet. And I also have a few extra up here at the front if anyone would like to take a look at those. Again, it's just showing surrounding zonings, city of sisters, city limits, and as well as property ownership for nearby parcels. At the work session, we discussed the UGB expansion process in general, but again, that's not part of this application request. And then we also discussed sort of the current zoning and what is allowed versus the proposed zoning. And I wanted to clarify too for the board, did a bit of research into some of the history of the property, and I want to show this plat map up here. Part of this, so you can see lot 1, 2, and 3 is actually the subject property, and it was platted as a residential subdivision in 1990. Lot 4 is what is within the city of Sisters and is now part of Mackenzie Meadows Village, the current neighborhood just to the south. So the current property, this is important to show that the current property in fact has 3 legal lots of record. This is an approved platted subdivision. There is a dwelling and septic system and barn on lot 3. And so if the property owner, under the current zoning, they would essentially need a conditional use permit to establish a dwelling on either lot 1 or lot 2. The outcome of such an application is unknown, but that would be the process if they wanted to act on the current zoning for this property. And then MUA 10 as the proposed zoning, is a 10-acre minimum lot size, so up to 5 lots or 5 homes may be built in total.
Is that map rotated sideways from what I'm expecting?
It is, yeah, so.
Okay, just
to the
making sure I'm
right-
seeing it the same way.
Yeah, so to the right is north.
Yep, okay, good.
Okay,
That's
yeah.
exactly what I was seeing.
Yep, thanks for that. And then one other clarification was this zone change would not impact or change the current combining zones that apply to the property, which include landscape management and the airport safety overlay. And so wanted to just clarify that that would not change with a zone change.
Ellie, on this plat map, what is that? So in what would be the northernmost lot, what is that diagonal, that little diagonal,
Oh, yes, I
Parallel lines.
believe it's, and I've got this on a larger, let me pull this up larger. Got it here.
All the backups slides just in case.
Yeah, oops. Bear with me here. Yeah, it's not sure. I believe it's a utility easement. Yeah, I'm gonna try to pull that up larger so we can see. Is it this line?
Yeah, I
Commissioner
was
Trank?
just trying to, I was just curious what that was.
Yeah,
I mean,
oh yeah, it
looks like
is.
It's right about where the landscape combining zone ends.
Yeah, so it is, I can see it here, it's a utility easement. Yeah.
Okay.
And then for record addition, so the staff memo for the commissioners was posted on July 30th. Between then and today, I've received additional 8 public written comments, 6 in opposition, 2 in support. Those have been uploaded to the record. I don't see any more that have come in, but certainly if I get any during the hearing, we'll be uploading those, and then any written comments we get as well during the hearing. For everyone, the application record is posted here, deschutes.org / Mackenzie Meadow Village. And again, just wanted to, for folks that may not be familiar with the county's review process for these resource plan amendments, step 1 is the initial hearing with the hearings officer. We're now here at the board, which is the second required public hearing. And for the board today, at the conclusion of today's hearing, the board has 4 options. They may continue the hearing to a date and time certain. They may close the oral portion of the hearing and leave the written record open to a date and time certain. They may close the hearing and schedule deliberations for a date and time to be determined, or close the hearing and commence deliberations.
I got one request on the previous slide, recommendations hearing. Could we get some words about what a recommendation really is? I mean, because I'm a hearings officer is a professional in the domain, looking at our code and the application and giving us a recommendation. Yeah, I mean, can staff maybe talk about just that process in a kind of a higher level fashion?
Yeah, so I think so essentially with these plan amendment zone changes, because it's a resource zone, the board, is the final decision maker. And so this hearing is held de novo, meaning new evidence can be taken, a different outcome could be determined. But, the hearings officer is a recommendation that is part of the record, but the board may come to a different conclusion.
Well, even the scenario of a hearings officer is a professional land use, I don't know if it's a lawyer always, but, just the fact that it's a complete review. I guess, that concept, because yes, we are the Board of Commissioners and we're reviewing it again, but just, what is that? What's the weight of that? What's the scope of that effort? I think Will sees for him. I'm just asking for that information.
Yeah, good morning, Chair, Commissioners. Again, your planning manager, Will Groves. So in our Title 22, the hearings officer is authorized to make final decisions about certain types of applications. So if those applications are not further appealed, that's the final decision. So he or she is the hearings body and the decision maker.
But that's a qualified land use lawyer looking at all the information, the code and the application. So I'm just saying the validity of that recommendation.
Oh, and so in the case of the matter before you, because this matter by Title 22 necessarily comes to the board, the hearings officer that heard this previously is not a decision maker. So they bring the full weight of their experience and produce what would otherwise be a decision to the board, but noting that it is not a final decision and thus has to be couched as a recommendation. So it comes with the full analysis and experience and the full process that we would go through for a decision by the hearings officer. But because they're precluded from being the decider on that matter, it comes to you as a recommendation.
Yep, understood. Thank you.
And so again, just recapping, yeah, for the board, they have options at the end of the public hearing. I can revisit this once we get through testimony, but that concludes my staff report, available for any additional questions before we move into the applicant's testimony.
Questions?
Ellie, do you have a map, or can you just show me on an existing map where specifically Trout Creek is in that Trout Creek management area?
Yes, let me pull up Dial here. Dial, so you'll see this amber color overlay is the approximate location of Trout Creek. So here's the 3 tax lots. So it's almost bisects. Here's that northern tax lot. It's really at the terminus of this McKinney Ranch Road right of way.
And if looking at this zoning map, Waichus Creek, which is a much more substantial water body, has its own, it has its own, zoning overlay. I'm curious what the threshold is to get that kind of a designation versus what we've got with Trout Creek. I mean, why does Trout Creek not have the kinds of designations that Waichus Creek does?
Yeah, and I think Commissioner Chang, you're speaking about the landscape management overlay associated with Waichus Creek, the scenic corridor. And I may ask Will, our planning manager, to help me with this. But yeah, Trout Creek, it's identified as a perennial stream in our comprehensive plan. I don't know if it, in the 1990s when they designated the LM overlay, it may not have risen to levels of protection at the time by the decision makers to have that landscape management overlay.
And Hallie's on the right track there. So when you think about the landscape management overlay, and it's easy to get this backwards, it's important to remember that these landscape management corridors, streams, and roads were designed for people on that stream or road to have a kind of a natural or less impacted view. So the LM corridor doesn't protect properties that are adjacent to a road or a river. It protects people who are on that road or river, the view corridors associated with that. So the roads and rivers that were identified as LM are ones that potentially that someone reasonably would be on that road or river. And so in 1992, generally it's limited to navigable or things that people or rivers that people have access to. So again, no protections generally to the public other than, you are a legitimate user of that facility, the road or the river, and we're trying to keep it looking relatively natural for you. Again, not trying to keep all development invisible, but a muted earth tones screening for things that are located. So this was not identified as one of the waterways afforded those protections.
Okay. There's for the purposes of land use, though, a Waichus Creek has, I believe, certain kinds of floodplain protections, riparian buffers, things like that. Can you tell me what Trout Creek has?
Yeah, certainly. So, and Hallie, jump in here if there's a nuance that I'm missing here. When you think about the floodplain is specifically an area that is mapped by FEMA. So FEMA doesn't purport to map all potential areas of flooding or all water bodies in Deschutes County. What they did back in kind of starting in the 80s and proceeding through the 90s was put an emphasis on areas where there was an intersection between a probability of flooding and the likelihood of insurance loss associated with that. So you'll see that the floodplain maps, for example, Indian Ford Creek and Sisters isn't mapped, and certainly sees some high water at times, and it wasn't identified as a priority for mapping at those times. So if you are in a mapped floodplain, there's certain requirements that come both out of FEMA and in our code in association with development in those areas. And this Trout Creek does not have a floodplain mapped in association with it. So certain requirements don't trigger from that. But certainly as a water body, it's subject to a 100-foot setback, for example, and other riparian protections that are associated with that for structures. To the extent there are no mapped wetlands associated.
There's potential. I mean, we've got the amber.
And so it's also identified on the state wetland inventory. So to the extent that there's a off-channel riparian habitats or habitat, associated with wetlands, any development that happened in the area would be noticed to the Department of State Lands, and to the extent that it had the possibility of impacting either the channel, which is regarded as a wetland for the purposes of state and local regulation, as well as any adjacent areas that had perennial wetland characteristics, those would also receive protections.
Okay. So even if this is not as big of a water body as Waichus Creek, there is a built-in 100-foot setback that would govern, any future land use applications for development.
To the extent that those occurred in the county.
Okay.
Is that 100 feet on both sides of the creek?
Yes.
So it's a 200-foot, okay.
And there are exceptions and if, ands, and buts about that. But generally, you have to either be 100 feet back from it, or if it's physically impossible to develop a property within the 100 feet, there's a way to be closer than that with some very significant limitations. So,
okay,
some options there.
Yeah, no, it's helpful to understand, what kind of built-in protections there are. Just like during the work session, I was asking about the landscape, the scenic corridor, and what kind of protections that would provide for the scenic corridor. It's helpful to understand these aspects of Trout Creek. Thank you.
Great. Okay, at this time, we're going to proceed with a public hearing on this matter. I am going to follow the kind of the flow of events here. So the applicant is first up. And I think we were able to put a little teeny timer in the corner of this, so it won't be a big one in their face, but we'll keep track of 30 minutes.
Commissioner or Chair DeBone, Commissioners Chang and Adair, thank you for having us today. My name is Chris Koback, K-O-B-A-C-K. I'm at 937 Northwest Newport, Suite 20 and 97703. And I have the privilege this morning of appearing before you on behalf of Mackenzie Meadow Village LLC and its members. I'll refer to it as MMV because that's a mouthful. With me to my right is one of the members, Kurt Kahlberg, and seated behind us is another member, Bill Willits. All of the members are deeply rooted in the Sisters community. They've been there for many years. The other member is Ashley Akura Reed. Her father, Bill Reed, was an original member of MMV before his death. And I want to start out by briefly mentioning the interrelationship that we heard about between what we're trying to do today and the Sisters UGB expansion process. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it because they are very separate, independent processes, but they're related in this way. My clients have been very transparent from the beginning about what their vision is, their long-term goal. And they did that in large part because as longtime members of the community, they have a lot of respect for Sisters and all of its residents. And they wanted to be very transparent about what they're trying to accomplish. They didn't want to come in and ignore this long-term goal of becoming part of the city and providing housing, and then have and get approval and then come back and do that and have this community say, well, that's a bait and switch. So they've been very upfront with everybody, including the county. And their vision really stems from the fact that, like a lot of cities in Oregon,
counties, Sisters has a housing crisis. There's just not enough housing for the people that work there. Particularly affordable and workforce housing is a significant need. And MMV, my client, they have this vision of helping, contributing to the cure for that crisis, and they want to use their property. And their property, the reason they feel it's very, very important that their property be part of the solution is it's easily developable. It's flat, it's large, or relatively 58 acres. It has very little geographic limitations. It's already got a lot of public utilities stubbed to it from the south. As you see, it was already kind of planned for future residential development at some level in the 90s. It has no legal restrictions. It's close to the school. It's a walking distance to downtown. They feel it's really well situated to provide a part of the solution. And the most important thing is it's a committed ownership. They're staunch advocates for providing the housing that's needed in Sisters. So this application really is to address one limitation, a current limitation that the property has. And this kind of goes back to what Commissioner Chang, one of the questions you asked at the work session that I attended, is what is that limitation? And it stems from the state regulations for UGB expansions. You're supposed to, a city has to look at lands in priorities. Priority one is lands that are already exception areas, the RREA exception areas. They get number one priority. I think it's either urban reserves or marginal lands get two, and Sisters doesn't have any. And then lower value resource land is the third priority, and high value resource land is the last priority. And my client MMV, they decided they were going to approach this the right way. They want to become priority one eventually, and through this process, and then hopefully become part of the solution to the city's problem. But this is a separate application. If the property is rezoned, as we request, then it has to go through the city process as well before anything is developed on it. We feel it would be ranked very high by the city. You have a letter from the city, February 2025 in the record. The city council issued a letter where they so much acknowledged that if this were priority one land and they looked at it the same as other priority one lands, it would rank very high. And probably for most of the reasons I just said. It's easily developable and it's situated in a great location. So the application that went before the hearings officer was simply to change the designation from resource to exception, and then to apply MUA 10 zoning as opposed to F2 zoning. What's not before you is, should this become part of the UGB? Should it be developed in any specific way? None of that's before you. And as far as introductory comments, the last thing I want to say is there is a timing issue. The letter that you have from the city council in February tells you the city's perspective. They're moving forward to address their problem. They want to keep going. To be part of that, we need a decision. And so we are going to ask you today, respectfully, at the end of this, to close the record today and start your deliberations, because we don't want to get too far out of step with the city process if possible. If this is if this property can be part of the city solution, we think it has to be done fairly quickly as the city has requested. And I think the state law allows you to do that. This is not the first evidentiary hearing. And if your council will advise you on this, obviously, but there are case law that if the initial hearing happens at a planning commission or another hearing body, and there's a second hearing, it's not subject to the mandatory reopening of the record. I acknowledge that you have that discretion. We're just going to ask you to exercise that discretion to expedite this process. So the property, is it slides up there? This is the property. Some of this you've already seen. It's immediately north of a city development. It's just adjacent to the high school compound. It's next to the conservancy that's owned by the school district.
Northwest is the RR10 tollgate neighborhood, and then north and east is federal land. You can see how some of the roads are already stubbed up from the property to the south. And you can also see a marked difference between the tree coverage, and that's going to be an important part of our presentation. About the time, Mr. Kohlberg talked about this at the hearings officer hearing, about the time of the toll gate development with visions that you saw from 1990, that plat map, there was a lot of thinning done on this property, and there aren't nearly as many trees and other vegetation on it as the surrounding forest land. And so part of the first process of doing this the right way, MMV hired Gary Kitzrow, and he's on the DLCD website as, a qualified person to assess capacity of this property for forest use. And his report's in the record, and he concluded based on the soil's limited capacity for tree growth, that this is not suitable property for commercial foresting operations. And I think, as Commissioner Chang noted at the work session as well, it's kind of an area that's marginally good for ponderosa pines anyway. When you combine that and the climate factors you talked about with Mr. Kitzrow's report, it just seems like there, to us anyway, and the reason we're here is there's a more beneficial use for this property than forest land. And we can, as I'm going to get to, we can address the other purposes for forest land and how they can be accommodated under the zoning. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the LM when I talk about Goal 5, the landscape management, but your staff did a wonderful job of showing you where it is. I did my own exercise. It's in the record. It's probably not as good as staff's, but I used dial to do some measuring, and I got, that corner is about 0.17 miles from the middle of the highway, that northeast corner. Most of the rest of the property, if not all of it, doesn't come within a quarter mile. And so that, I think that's an important factor, and it also responds to Commissioner Chang's comments on where that is and how it applies. So the hearings officer, as Chair DeBonne mentioned, it was Tommy Brooks is the hearings officer. He's a trained land use lawyer. We presented everything to him. Opponents presented everything they had to him. And he made a decision, a recommendation to you where he addressed all of the technical requirements for the application and made his proposed findings. And he recommended to the board that they approve the change in the designation and the zone change. And I'm going to just kind of, instead of going through everything, because he did a really good job, I think, of walking you through the statutory and regulatory requirements. I'm just going to talk a little bit about bigger picture, how we interpret his decision. But obviously, as Mr. Grove said, you are the ultimate decision maker. His recommendation is not binding. We hope you go with it, but you're going to make your own decision. So we don't disagree, never have disagreed. This is resource land right now, designated zone resource land. We're not arguing that it shouldn't be. We are taking a goal exception. We are asking you to approve a goal exception to Goal 4. And the statute, ORS 197732, and the corresponding administrative rules that Ms. King talked about, tell us exactly what we have to do that. And the hearings officer went through them, and we are going under the reasons exception. We have to show that there are reasons why the policies embodied in Goal 4 should not apply to this property. And the first thing we looked at was Mr. Kitzrow's report. The main purpose for forest land is forest use. This is not suitable for forest use. Of course, there's collateral or equally important, I suppose, reasons for forest land. And one is to conserve soil, air, natural resources, water resources, wildlife habitat. And how we approach that, and what the hearings officer agreed with, is we looked at how those policies and purposes and goals could be at least equally or even better met under an MUA 10 zone. So it's not suitable for forest land, and we feel it can be equally protected through MUA 10 zoning. That was the basis for our reasons exception under the first prong. And what we did is we looked at kind of what uses would be allowed on MUA 10 when you're looking at resources, and then what can be allowed on forest land. And one of the things that we looked at was, well, under forest use,
there's not the same setbacks. You can get you can go through the Forestry Act and cut vegetation closer to a stream than under MUA 10. That was one factor. We also looked at how the minimum parcel size for MUA is 10 acres, leaves a lot of room open for preserving natural resources, leaving open space. I know there's some question on the status of your cluster development after the Destiny Court case, or currently it's a 10-acre minimum. So that would leave a lot of space. If the cluster development comes back after the work you're doing on the comprehensive plan, following the, well, then their cluster and the plan development would come back. But the way we looked at it is with a 65% and a 75% open space requirement, that's going to allow the same amount of dwellings, but it's also going to conserve significant portions of the 58 acres for conservation. And I think it's also important that to note, it's a footnote in Mr. Brooks's decision, but it's a very important footnote is, and Commissioner Chang asked about conditions that could be put on this to further protect resources. And Mr. Brooks noted that under the state regulations, 660-004-0018, because we're asking you for a goal exception, you can limit uses, density, and other things that go on that property. So if in the end of this, you decide, well, we think it should be zoned differently and designated differently, but there are some uses we just don't think are compatible. That regulation he found allows you to actually limit under the exception part of our application what happens on that property. So you may find that the only thing appropriate within the goal exception process would be a certain density of residential uses. That would be available to you. So that's how we handled the first prong is there's reasons why the policy shouldn't apply to this property. The second test is whether there are other exception lands that can reasonably accommodate the use. And what we did there, can I get the zoning map up? Or do you have?
You might be able to, well, forward, yeah, just forward the slides with the up and down arrow. Maybe up and down or left and right.
Oh, there it is.
Here you go.
Good for me. So this is in the record too. This is a bigger picture and then a blown up picture of the zoning map. And what we noted is if you look at where the MUA 10 property currently is, there's very little. And it's not near the city at all. And that struck us as kind of odd because when you look at the purpose for MUA 10, one of the purposes of MUA 10 is to provide an orderly transition from rural uses to urban uses. So you'd almost expect to see more MUA 10 closer to the city than farther away. And so that was our start. We looked at, well, Mackenzie Meadow Village property is immediately adjacent to the city. It is stubbed to the utilities. It has everything it would need to promote that orderly transition. Then we went and looked at the other exception property, and they're all the red, basically. It's the RR10. And what we focused there on was we don't believe those can reasonably accommodate the type of development that MUA 10 would accommodate on the subject property for a lot of reasons. One, they're all parcelized. I mean, they go from 2 acres up to 10 or more, but with a 10-acre minimum, there's not a lot more you can do with it. You can't divide them. We also looked at whether they could accommodate the use based on legal restrictions. They're all, basically all of them are within some kind of restrictive covenant. They can't be divided. They have to be residential use. And so we looked at, could they reasonably accommodate the breadth of uses in the MUA 10? And we concluded that they couldn't. And so that was our primary analysis on the second prong. And the hearings officer agreed with us on that. And the third test is it's a mouthful, but I'll summarize my interpretation of it is I think you have to look at whether the impacts of the change to MUA 10 would be significantly greater if it were done on other properties for which an exception is needed. In other words, other resource property. The way we looked at it is
there's only two other resource properties we found near Sisters. One would be EFU land, high value EFU land, because as staff noted, if it's determined not to be agricultural land, you don't need a goal exception because it's not resource land. So it'd be high value farmland or forest land. Those would be the other resource lands that you could consider zoning MUA 10. And we believe, and the hearings officer agreed, that if you put MUA 10 on high value farmland, it's significantly more impactful because you're taking valuable farmland that produces crops and provides industry out of production, perhaps. If you rezoned other forest land, we felt it would be more impactful because if you just look at the aerial map around Sisters, there's no forest land that's as sparsely forested as the MMV property. It all has more viable, healthy forests. And so we thought that would be a greater impact. And again, I think the hearings officer voiced his agreement with that. The last one is you have to look at whether it's compatible, the rezoning to MUA is compatible with the surrounding properties. And there again, we start with what's the purpose? It's a transition zone in part. It's also to allow development that is consistent with the character, the rural character, and the capacity of the natural resources. And so we looked at MUA 10 and what uses are allowed. We concluded that they're very low intense, large acre development. They leave a lot of room open. As far as toll gate, it would be very consistent with toll gate. I think the most reasonable assumption would be there'd be some form of residential development. That would be consistent with toll gate because it would be essentially the same thing. It would be consistent with the school because it would, the school serves the rural use. In the record, when the school rezoned in 2002, they, in their application, and this is in some of our material, that 80% of the students that attend the schools come from outside the city. So we felt that was a real compelling factor in applying that. It would be compatible with the school. We think it would be very compatible with the southern development because it would be exactly what I said, a transition from a less dense rural type development into a city development. And then—
Excuse me, could I just interrupt you for a
Yes.
second? You said 80% of the kids come from outside the city. What year was that?
That was 2002.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that was a long time ago. Yeah.
It's the only statistic we had. We were looking at because the school district went through the same process we're going through in 2002. And as staff noted, when we started this process, we asked, do you have any examples of forest land being rezoned in near Sisters? And your staff was very helpful, and they gave us 3 other examples, and that was one of them. So we relied on that to kind of as a framework for what we're doing. And so where was I? Consistency or compatibility with the surrounding uses. When you look at the forest property, we think it's really telling that there is so much county residential development next to the forest in this area that our conclusion was those types of uses have to be consistent or they wouldn't be there. Tollgate's consistent with the forest land that surrounds it. And if you go to the northeast, there's our 10 property up by Indian Ford. That's compatible with the forest use. And we believe that the existence of those developments proves that point. The next thing we talked, your staff did a great job of talking about how that regulation 6600402200221 works. It's the catch-all phrase, and we agree with how the hearings officer did it. It just parallels what I just talked to you under the statute. He found, since we met the reasons exception under the statute, and the reasons exception can be also used under that regulation, that we therefore met that regulation. We did also address the residential one, the residential part of that regulation, and how we did that is we looked at it, and there's a phrase in there that said you can look at market demands for the need to rezone property if the market demands are dictated by other economic activity in the area. And we looked at it as the school is a huge economic activity. It provides jobs, it provides sporting events that bring people in. It's an economic activity that really suggests or even kind of compels the conclusion that that's an appropriate, maybe one of the more appropriate places to put MUA 10 to allow some rural, lower density residential development. So we addressed them both. Statewide planning goals. 4 we're taking an exception to, 5 applies, and we've addressed that. We did an ESAE. We followed regulations, and the hearings officer agreed we did it. We were allowed to talk about 2 resources in the same analysis. We were allowed to talk about categories of uses. We presented that consistent with the regulations, and the hearings officer agreed that we properly addressed goal 5.
The LLM, the one thing I wanted to mention on that, or just reinforce rather, is Mr. Groves was very informative at the work session. The LM zone is not, the goal is not to create invisibility, it's to create compatibility. We have a quarter of a mile, slightly less than one area between the highway and there, heavily forested between us. Even if the Forest Service does some fire defense, we believe there's going to be very little chance that anybody from the highway sees any development there. But if you apply the LM standards, any visibility that they see will be mitigated effectively.
When you said fire defense, you're referring to opening it up more.
Yeah,
If
you ride
trees
in
were missing.
Skyliners and some of these other areas, you'll
Yeah.
see where the Forest Service is going in and trying to
Opening it wide up, yep.
thinning out. But we think because of the significant spatial distance, even if they were to thin that area out more than it is already, and it seems pretty thin to me, but even if they did more, I don't think you'd create a compatibility problem. So we, goal 14, hearings officer agreed that the MUA 10 are not urban uses. And so he agreed that we did not have to address many of the goal 14 urbanization requirements. And that's been how the board has handled that before based on my reading of prior decisions. The comprehensive plan, there wasn't a lot on it. What we did on the county comprehensive plan, that was the last thing we had to check the box. We had to show that this was consistent with the county comprehensive plan, and this is the one that was still in place. What we did is we did it kind of more general to begin with, and your staff asked us to do it more detailed. And so in the record, you'll see our supplemental burden of proof. We went through every conceivable policy that could apply, and we specifically addressed each one. And you'll see in the opponent's testimony below the hearings officer, there were only a couple that were referenced, and they were related to Chapter 2, the resource protection. And I think we've addressed that through our discussion of how the MUA 10 standards, development standards, and size limitations are more than effective to protect the stream, the vegetation, the trees, and in many cases, like we said, we think more protective than F2. And so we agreed with the hearings officer's analysis that he did a slightly different analysis, which I think is equally plausible. He said, well, if you're doing a zone change, it's because you already got the designation change to exception area. And so he looked at it through that lens and said, well, a zone change to MUA 10 would be consistent because the designation has already been changed to RREA. And so I think he's right on that, but we approached it a little bit different. I think both you can get to the same conclusion both ways. And so I'm here to answer any questions you have. I appreciate your time. And again, I just want to reinforce our request to you today is to obviously to approve the application consistent with the hearings officer recommendation, but we would very much appreciate a decision and deliberations as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to express appreciation for laying out the high level vision first and kind of being very transparent and clear with the community about what your ultimate objective is. I know it's made this process a little more complicated because people are conflating the two things and you know writing in letters of opposition about inclusion in the urban growth boundary. But you know, to me, if that is really what you want to do with this land, I really appreciate you just putting it out there and helping us and the community understand how this is a two-step process. You have to have MUA 10 in order to be prioritized for consideration for the UGB. I wanted to ask, you know, just kind of playing out some different scenarios. There's if you did get this plan amendment and zone change, it would allow the city to consider this property for inclusion in the UGB immediately. If you were granted the plan amendment and zone change and this property was not brought into the UGB immediately, I'm curious whether your vision would change. So if your long-term vision is inclusion in the city, and, you know, development at urban densities, then I guess, you know, I'm curious how you would imagine using the land or not using the land in the interim before you could be considered in the next UGB expansion. So just if you could play that scenario out for me, and this is part of the reason why I was asking about cluster development during the work session is, you know, I'm just trying to picture if you happened to miss the UGB expansion this go round, you know, what would be, you know, how would you set yourself up to achieve your long-term vision at a future date?
Well, first, thank you for the introductory comments. We really appreciate that. You captured what we were trying to do all along, and my clients particularly, and that is don't hide the ball. Tell people what you want. And then explain why that's a good thing. To answer your specific question, it isn't my property. I can tell you what my clients, I believe they want to do, and they're here. They will be testifying during the public comments, and they can expand on it. But if we don't get in the urban growth boundary this time, my clients aren't going away. They have a vision, and they're committed to it. And so what I can reasonably expect to see on that property would be some form of cluster development if this board passes the new comprehensive plan and has consistency with the zoning code and clusters and PUDs come back. I think you could expect something where a significant portion of this property were left open because my clients will be coming back. And we think the city's going to need the property eventually because the land that other land that's being considered has a lot of restrictions, and we just don't see it developing the housing the city needs anytime soon, contrasted with us. So we think the city would be looking at this again, and we would develop it in a way that would allow it to be developed and brought into the city. We would not foreclose that ability because we think it's a reality.
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of other questions. So we've unpacked to a significant degree the scenic corridor for the highway. I was just asking some questions about Trout Creek, and I guess for the scenic corridor, you know, I appreciate that you know, things that would be built, you know, within the scenic corridor, you would use specific color paints, things like that, in order to kind of reduce the visibility. I'm wondering if you'd be open, you know, to voluntarily kind of push back a little bit for, you know, just leave a little bit of that corner you know, undeveloped in order to just kind of leave the scenic corridor free and clear. One of the other reasons I ask about this is that very north end of the property is where you see the kind of intersection of the toll gate, you know, the toll gate holdings and these holdings, and while Tollgate doesn't come all the way to the corner, you know, to the southeast, is that southeast? Yeah, to the southeast corner of their holdings. You know, the development does come pretty far in there, and if there was a little bit, if you had lower densities or no development in you know, the very northern tip of I don't know which lot that is. Is that lot 3 or lot 2 or whichever lot it is, the northernmost lot? Then there would also be this you would maintain the connectivity of the forest, you know, between the Forest Service holdings, you know, along the highway and north of there, and that school district property that is otherwise, you know, a pretty nice piece, you know, 160-acre chunk of forest. I think that probably is. So just, you know, maintaining that habitat connectivity for wildlife would be valuable. And you know, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, absolutely no development up in that end, but just like you know, I guess the question would be, how could you be sensitive to maintaining connectivity of the forests, on that north end between the Forest Service land and the school district property, and then through the school district property into the Forest Service land down to the southwest of there as well. So that gets at the kind of scenic corridor, kind of the hopes for the scenic corridor, hopes for forest connectivity. And I mean, the third question that's come up for me in terms of, things we want to be sensitive to, with the discussion of Trout Creek, 100-foot buffer on either side is pretty good. I'm wondering if there's ways that the build out, if you ultimately get to, the kind of urban build out that you want, that the build out could be done in a way that, gave even just a little bit more of a cushion to Trout Creek for, for wildlife habitat connectivity. I mean, it could actually be a great recreational amenity for the development, having, a nice open corridor, a forested corridor along Trout Creek with a pathway or something like that. So those are just a couple of, I guess they're basically requests. How can you be sensitive to these values, the forest connectivity, Trout Creek, and the scenic corridor.
Thank
And-
you for the question.
and-
It's great when you get a question that you actually kind of anticipated. I have an answer.
Yeah.
So first of all, under the MUA 10 zone, my client is very open to creating a buffer in that corner and that north side. In fact, that little box you see up in the corner of that plat map, I'm told that's a pump station for the Tollgate well. And my client testified in front of the hearings officer that they've already approached Tollgate about creating a buffer around that area for Tollgate. My client's already thinking ahead of how they can continue this as cooperative relationship. We know a lot of people in Tollgate don't like what my client's trying to do. But notwithstanding that, my client's been open with him, have been engaged with him, and trying to create a partnership to the extent we can, where both parties' interests are served. And the trickier question, because I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves and cross-pollinate these two processes, but what I can tell you is if this property comes into the city, my client is committed to putting that stream in a tract, committed to protecting that whole area. They're committed to putting parks in. They want to, this is their community. I guess that's the best way to say it. They're not developers coming in to make money. They are community members who are trying to develop their property to provide a benefit for the city. And they're going to continue to do that at all phases, Commissioner Chang. It's not just the housing that they're going to develop, it's the parks. And you can see the property below, McKinsey Village 1, it has a lot of those components. And I think what you'd see up there is something very similar, maybe at bigger scale because of the creek, you'd see maybe a bigger open space. So yes, they're very committed to all of that. And they'd be open to conditions. Like I said, we believe the county board has some discretion under that statute to limit the uses and densities and other things. And they're receptive to all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions? And you'll have a rebuttal opportunity also.
Right.
So seeing none at this time, we're all set. Thank you. At this time, agency comments, if any, so agencies, land, water, state agencies, city. So seeing none, at this time, persons in support. So this is a 3-minute testimony by individuals being able to provide testimony, and I've got 4 requests to speak at this time, and also that could happen remotely. So Mr. Tim Knope. And then following will be Tina Mensing.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name is Tim Knope. Address is 1051 Northeast 4th Street, Bend, Oregon, 97701. Thank you. I am here in support of the
Central, of the Mackenzie Meadows Village LLC Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Zone Change. I think this is critical to give the City of Sisters the opportunity to look at all lands essentially on an equal basis. And I think as you've heard, the city said that this parcel would score relatively high if it was able to be seen as the other lands are as it relates to UGB. And I recognize that this is specific to the zone change today, but I think it has significant implications. And so being here on behalf of COBA in support of this zone change, I think is important. I would also note that you've never seen me before the county commission. So I think that should indicate the relative importance of this, because we are in a housing emergency in all areas of Deschutes County. And we need those who are making those decisions to be able to have all the tools and land available to them to make the right decisions for the communities that they represent. And so I think by moving on this in a judicious way and giving the City of Sisters that opportunity, I think would go a long way toward resolving some of the situations that do exist today. We all know that Sisters is going to have I think it's over 1,700 homes in the next 20 years for current and future need. And the connection between this particular property and basically the current residential property of the city, I think that connectivity is noticeable and important as well. So I would encourage you to take this up today and to go ahead and pass it, and just allow the opportunity for the city to make some decisions down the road as it relates to what fits best in the UGB. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Following will be Tina Mensing, and then after that, Morgan Greenwood.
Good morning. My name is Tina Mensing, 69382 Tollgate in Sisters. And thank you for letting me speak. On behalf of the Sisters Opportunity for Unified Living, which that's what I'm representing as SOUL, I am requesting your support in approving the Mackenzie Meadow Village, their application for a planned amendment and zone change in line with the hearing officer's recommendation. The zone redesignation is essential for allowing the City of Sisters to classify these parcels as priority one lands within the city's current urban growth boundary process. SOUL is dedicated to creating and sustaining affordable long-term housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Sisters. Our mission is to foster independence, inclusion, and a genuine sense of belonging within our community. Currently, adults with developmental and intellectual disabilities are forced to relocate to Bend, Redmond, or even the Valley in search of affordable housing and access to the necessary support services for independent living. This separation severely impacts their ability to remain connected to family and their connection in Sisters. SOUL envisions a community where people of all abilities are not only welcomed and supported, but also empowered to live independently, where stable and affordable housing becomes the foundation for dignity, belonging, and lifelong connections, all within their hometown of Sisters. In order to bring this vision to life, it's crucial that the UGB expansion in Sisters includes sufficient lands to provide affordable and attainable housing for the individuals that we serve. The Mackenzie Meadow Village parcels are ideal for that purpose. Thank you for your service to Deschutes County, and we strongly encourage you to follow the hearing officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Great, thank you for joining us.
Oh, Tina, I do have a question. So is there zero IDDA housing then in Sisters at this moment in time?
At this point, there's housing that includes some wraparound services, but is so few. And you would have to really qualify for that specific type of housing. What we envision is, for obviously it's a spectrum of people that, some of them need those wraparound services, some of them don't. And those are, especially those that don't, are the ones that are having to move to Redmond and Bend and to the Valley. And it's just really too far for them to be in connection with their families.
Thank you.
So Morgan Greenwood, and then following will be Peter Hoover.
Good morning, Chair DeBonne, Vice Chair Adair Chang. My name is Morgan Greenwood. Address is 1646 West Lambert Avenue in Sisters, Oregon, 97759. I'm here this morning as a Sisters resident and also as a member of the UGB Steering Committee. I urge your support of the McKenzie Meadows Village LLC Comprehensive Plan Amendment and Zone Change. Like all other Deschutes County cities, Sisters is experiencing a housing crisis. According to the 2024 Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Methodology Report, Sisters must build 1,791 homes in the next 20 years to meet both our current and future housing need. I strongly believe that it is crucial that to best facilitate the development of this badly needed housing, the city must be able to evaluate the most ideal UGB expansion alternatives. With the support of the UGB Steering Committee, Sisters City Council sent a letter to this body regarding this application and noted that, quote, the subject parcels score well in our latest objective analysis against the required review factors for a UGB expansion. However, they are currently considered lower priority lands per state rules, end quote. The parcel's size, sole ownership, adjacency to existing infrastructure, proximity to existing schools, parks, commercial amenities, and adjoining location to this current UGB all make these parcels worthy of serious consideration. The nature of Sisters' housing crisis makes it imperative that we do the UGB expansion process right the first time. Many of the current expansion areas present a significant challenge to future development due to multiple ownership of small parcels in county subdivisions with septic systems to decommission, and highly restrictive CC&Rs, which take time and expense to amend. There are also challenges to building new infrastructure due to topography, and as a result, there is a serious risk that these lands cannot be developed in a timely manner. Due to the precarity of our housing need, we simply don't have the time to learn this the hard way and go through a costly and time-consuming land swap and UGB amendment in only 5 or 10 years, if the state would permit a land swap at all. We must do this right the first time. Thank you for your consideration this morning and service to our community.
Great, thank you. I do see the raised hand on here, so that'll be following. The fourth request to speak today is Peter Hoover, and then we'll get to the online.
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I'm Peter Hoover, 221 South Ash Street, Sisters, Oregon, 97759. I'm here as an advocate for affordable and workforce housing. As Executive Director of Sisters Habitat for Humanity, I'm keenly aware of the significant shortage of affordable housing units in Sisters and the hurdles that impede the creation of new affordable and workforce housing. The 2019 City of Sisters Housing Needs Analysis and the December 2024 Oregon Department of Administrative Services Needs Analysis both show that more than 600 new affordable units are required in Sisters over the next 20 years. We're talking about housing for teachers. We're talking about housing for grocery store workers, retail sales clerks, hospitality workers, mechanics, medical personnel, manufacturing staff, retirees, and the talented graduating students from Sisters High School who want to remain in their hometown. For 35 years, Sisters Habitat has been the primary creator, by far the primary creator of affordable homes in Sisters, building 81 new homes with 40 more underway for completion in the next 2 years. We're out of land in 2 years. We don't have the funds to pay for the asking price for available properties. Our production will halt. As a result, the affordable housing shortage will increase. The owners of McKenzie Meadows are longtime residents and supporters of Sisters. Their long-term plan is to directly address the housing shortage, including the creation of affordable housing. The owners have voluntarily committed to 30% of the dwellings being affordable in the community. The owners understand the economic realities of what it takes to create affordable housing, and their construction partner is experienced in successfully building affordable and workforce housing throughout the Pacific Northwest and in Sisters. The hearing officers found that the applicants for McKenzie Meadows have met all the criteria for a Goal 4 exception. DLCD's comments have also been addressed. As you weigh this matter, I urge you to consider the impact your decision will have on the housing supply and, more importantly, the people who will have or not have an opportunity for stable, secure, and sustainable housing in Sisters. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr.
Peter, just to repeat, did you say that you've done 81 homes in the last 35 years and you have, did you say 40 that are, but then you're going to run out of land?
We're out of land. Once we
Yes.
build these 40, I mean, we're already committed for those 40 homes. We're already committed on the land. We already own the land. After that, I'm priced out.
Okay, thank you so much for coming.
Peter, one more question. So is Habitat tracking the UGB process in general
Yes.
and developing plans for, getting in on lands wherever they end up being designated?
I can assure you, Commissioner, I've been knocking on every door.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so going online, I see Mr. Kurt Scholl.
Yes, Commissioners, thank you. I'm here in the same vein as Peter, who just spoke before me. And instead of, he did a great job of presenting some of the stats. So I'll tell a few, I think, anecdotal stories. Really, I'm here as a proponent of affordable and workforce housing. So this has become more and more of a challenge for the Sisters School District to find housing for our staff members where they can actually live and work in our own community. I think each year for the last 5 years, we've had a job offer out to someone who has called back a week later and said, sorry, I can't afford to live in Sisters. I believe the average price now rivals that of Bend. And so we struggle in that regard. And I think anybody committed to workforce and affordable housing needs the strongest consideration in these processes. What was more startling to me this year was we hired a new elementary school principal, but in the process, we offered a round of candidates an opportunity to come visit as finalists. And these are jobs that pay 6 figures. And one of the candidates declined the offer to come to for the finalist interview because they couldn't afford housing in Sisters based on their dynamics. So it's become a bigger and bigger problem to sustain a thriving community, a strong school system. What I find is that my colleagues and I in Central Oregon steal staff members from each other because if they're living here or have lived here for a long time and not face the steep incline of property values, they're established and they're able to work here. It's the folks that we want to bring in the community that really find major challenges in attaining housing. Again, I would say that anything that expedites the impact on workforce housing for not only Deschutes County, but the city or the Sisters area would have a direct impact on our ability to keep retaining and recruiting quality candidates to work in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today. Is there anyone else online with the raised hand feature in support? Seeing none, we have 2 more requests to speak at this time. Mr. Bill Willets, and then following will be Kurt Kahlberg.
Bill Willis, 68621 East Highway 20, Sisters. I wanted to, first of all, acknowledge our team, because as I'm sitting in the audience, I realize we're kind of a miracle to be here. It's been a long, hard fight to get in front of the 3 of you. So I appreciate this moment. And I want to thank our city and you, because our city wrote and said, please try to expedite this, and we are. What I think I picked up is that this commission understands the scale of MMV and what it can bring to our community. And then you're hearing facets from Soul that I've worked with we've had numerous meetings about the idea of providing housing for developmentally disabled, or the relationships that's built between Peter Hoover and myself around habitat. And then finally, Kurt Scholes, our school superintendent, and our ability to work together. So this is the fabric of community I think we're talking about here. I think we're doing the right thing. And I want to thank you for hearing this. It's a powerful moment for me to just be here. And then the one thing I want to do is encourage you to expedite this. I recognize and acknowledge the importance of Land Watch and what they do in protecting our forests. I think we need to protect our families first. Our community needs to protect our families first. And that's what our team is committed to doing. So thank you.
Thank you for joining us. And then Mr. Kahlberg.
Yeah, my name is Kurt Kahlberg, Post Office Box 3500, Sisters, Oregon, Suite 126. We ran out of post office boxes, so we go to another location. When I moved to Sisters almost 40 years ago, population was 911. I always thought that was kind of funny. It's grown quite a bit. Our three families, the Reeds, the Willits, and the Kahlbergs, we used to have a saying that we would call it BBC, Bill, and Kurt. We've stuck together for 40 years. And when we say something, we're committed. We will do it. It's not a bait and switch. We don't play that game. And I've never had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Chang here, and believe it or not, this old cowboy majored in forestry, and I believe what you believe. We need to protect the streams and the trees and the old growth. But Mackenzie Meadow is prime for development. It was not clear cut, but darn close. It was thinned very heavily for the anticipation of development. I'm the only person that ever lived on that property. I can back up the decision that the county came to that it's poor soil. It's not much good. We ran some horses on it. It was just a big dirt cloud. We couldn't, so their opinion of the soil and that. But we do need workforce housing. We have a construction business. Not one of my employees can live in our town. They all have to live in Redmond, Terrebonne, some as far as Madras. The workforce housing that we used to have from the old mills that were in Sisters has all been replaced by apartments and expensive homes. We have none left. And it's became, Sisters is almost the rich and the poor. You can afford to live there if you're rich. But if you're a first-time home buyer, workforce housing, maybe a single individual that maybe was raised in this town, after you graduate from high school, you have to leave. That's wrong. And our three families that were committed to our late partner, Bill Reed, the football stadium's named after him. That shows you the value that he had in kids in our community. And we'll back it up. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so switching gears here. At this time, we have some requests to speak of other folks in opposition. So Sharon Booth is going to start, and then Roy Isbell will follow. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, good morning to all. My name is Sharon Booth. I live in Tollgate at 69453 Lasso in Sisters. I'm a retired physician, and I oppose the rezoning of the 58 acres northwest of Mackenzie Meadows development. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't discuss all the legal ramifications, but I am a nearby resident in Tollgate, which is a 50-year-old, well-established, low-density community. And the zoning of the 58 acres north of the current Mackenzie Meadows would probably lead to high-density housing. We've all acknowledged that, which could then be added to the urban growth boundary of Sisters. Now, destroying a large swath of forest and the natural floodplain created by Trout Creek would surely impact the adjacent Trout Creek Conservation Area, which is an outdoor laboratory for the students in biology classes at Sisters High School. This 160-acre conservation area protects several special species which are in danger of being reduced to rare individuals. And there is a community path through the reserve, which is well used, very favored by walkers, bikers, all manner of runners, especially from the local residential areas. My belief is that this development would increase wildfire risks and surely harm this special habitat. My belief is that the county commissioners are entrusted with planning the development of the county so as to minimize harm to the environment and plan for the good of the overall community. If you accept the planning department's recent support of the rezoning application, then the city of Sisters will likely add this property to the urban growth boundary. This is an inappropriate and unnecessary use of this forested land, since there are nearly 2,000 acres of priority 1 UGB options in other areas around Sisters. I hope that you will do the right thing and protect the very special natural world around us in Sisters by putting the benefit of the entire community first before the private financial gain of a few. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So then Rory Isbell, then following will be Mary Fleischman.
Before I begin, I have some written comments.
Great, yeah, please provide, yep. And then we do have a raised hand, so we'll get to you in a few moments. Thank you.
Morning, Chair DeBonne, Vice Chair Adair, and Commissioner Chang. For the record, my name is Rory Isbell. I'm a staff attorney with Central Oregon Land Watch. Our address is 2843 Northwest Lolo Drive, Suite 200, Bend 97703. Land Watch does oppose this application. We do request it be denied. We believe the hearings officer recommendation contains several errors, which are the bulk of the written testimony I've just handed you describes those. As you're aware, this application requests an exception to Goal 4 in order to rezone this forest land to a residential zone. Goal 4 protects forest land across the state for that land's many resources: forestry, fish and wildlife habitat, air, soil, and water quality, and recreation uses. We believe that there's a threshold matter in this application that must be addressed really before Land Watch, the public, even the county itself can adequately judge whether this application meets the applicable criteria. And that is that the applicant, and in turn the county, and its notification of the public duties, must identify what specific land uses are sought to justify a goal exception. The many criteria that do exist in state rule that must be met for an exception to the goals are centered around a specific land use or handful of land uses that are intended by an applicant. And, you know, LUBA has held in decisions in the past that a county must first make this threshold determination. And, you know, I cite in our comments, but that case is DLCD versus Umatilla County 39 or LUBA 715. The notice for today's hearing describes this application and its proposed goal exception as intended to accommodate urban development as part of the city sisters on this property. The applicant and the hearings officer, on the other hand, address all the goal exception criteria as if the application seeks the development allowed in the county's rural residential zones. Given this inconsistency, we do object to the notice for today's hearing. It must describe that a goal exception is proposed and must describe what the purpose of the goal exception is in an understandable manner. We think that the applicant must clarify its proposed use, and only then can the county, Landwatch, and the public have their procedural rights to a fair and informed hearing protected. You know, we've heard a lot of testimony, and Landwatch agrees that Sisters needs more affordable housing. We're also advocating for that outcome in the city's urban growth boundary process. But as framed by the applicant today, none of that testimony about the need for affordable housing is relevant because the application is framed around apparently a need for more MUA zoned areas. You know, a few seconds left, but one of the criteria for goal exception that we heard about from the applicant is that there are not other areas in the county that don't require a goal exception that could accommodate the proposed use. We attach with our comments today the county's own the rural housing profile that your staff produces. That document itself shows that there are 2,944 vacant rural residential lots in the county, and hundreds of those are zoned MUA, and those are vacant. And apparently they could accommodate what the application says is the proposed use, which is more MUA land in the county. Thank you for the time today. I'm happy to answer any questions or comments if you have them.
Could you repeat that number again, please?
2,944 vacant rural residential zoned lots in the county.
MUA?
About 400 or so, I don't have the specific number, are zoned MUA.
Thank you.
I have some questions about the goal 4 exception. So goal 4 puts forward a specific goals for well, you know, the state indicates what it wants forests to do for our community, what purposes it wants forests to serve. I was trying to work through thoughts the other day during the work session about these particular acres of forest. They are, it has been thinned to a pretty low density. It actually might be an appropriate density for how far on the margin of the range of ponderosa pine that this site is. It is, you know, as ponderosa pine lands go, it will be much lower productivity than lands that are, you know, farther west, higher up, more precipitation. But that doesn't mean that, you know, even though this isn't productive timberland, it doesn't mean that it can't serve other purposes that, you know, forest land is intended to serve and achieve various goals. I'm hoping you can put a little context around that. So if we're looking at these lands that are, you know, kind of on the margin of ponderosa pine, the range of ponderosa pine, not productive timberlands, what are the forest values within goal 4 that you would emphasize for this property?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, I think everyone who's commented on the goal 4 values of this property agrees that it is properly designated forest. And I think the reason for that, which, you know, is a more direct answer to your question, Commissioner Chang, that goal 4 is a very broad goal. Yes, it protects timber and merchantable tree species throughout the state, It's also written into the goal that the purpose of Goal 4 is to protect fish and wildlife, air, soil, and water quality, and recreation uses. So, I think many of those other, purposes for Goal 4 are clearly present on the site. We've heard a lot about the Trout Creek Conservation Area. There's testimony in the record of various species of wildlife, visiting this area. DLCD in their comments noted that recreation uses are allowed. You can permit a private park on forest land. So the zoning that currently applies to this property, that again, I think everyone agrees is the appropriate zoning. That's why a goal exception is sought today, because the applicant agrees that this property is correctly designated forest and zoned for forest uses. All those values are present on the site and do render it falling under the protective umbrella of Goal 4 to protect forest lands for all those values.
Okay. And if the applicant was willing to agree to some conditions, like lighter development on the north end to preserve the connectivity of contiguous forest lands, a bigger buffer along Trout Creek to or even a park of some kind, and also trying to really be mindful of honor the scenic corridor. What are your kind of additional concerns or continuing concerns with those kind of offers of trying to be sensitive to some of the key forest values we're concerned about?
Sure. Well, I think you heard me describe in the brunt of my comments today that we are eager to hear a specific proposal from the applicant here. If there were a specific type of development proposed, we and everyone involved would be able to participate on the merits of this application in a much more robust manner. But all we've heard so far is, urban development is the purpose, but it's analyzed under the MUA zone and all the uses allowed in the MUA zone. The goal exception criteria are written, they're framed around determining whether a specific use, whether there's valids to justify a specific use on resource land. So, I guess we're all ears. We would love to engage on a more robust conversation, but we just lack that clarity from the application about what the specific use is that we should be, analyzing the goal exception criteria under.
Thank you.
The process of a zone change and plan amendment is a step, and you're saying you want to see the next step before we get to just make a decision on this step. I mean, I don't know that Oregon's land use system works like that. It's like, well, what are you going to do with your private land that you're asking for a zone change on? Well, we'll let you know if we approve what you might be doing in the future. So it just seems like a catch-22 that you're trying to set up there.
I hear that confusion, and I think staff in their presentation before the testimony began touched on this. A goal exception application is very different from many of the other plan amendment zone change applications that the county has seen in recent years. There's a much more detailed, specific process that applies. So you talk about various steps.
So the reasons exception specifically are you referring to, or just goal exception itself?
Goal exception. It is a reasons exception proposed here. In the case of where a goal exception is proposed, it's all one step. A use has to be proposed in order to determine whether it qualifies for a goal exception.
Well, as I say, and then we're in that situation where this application is not an urban growth expansion discussion. Obviously, we had testimony on that in front of us, but it's not. The hearings officer's decision doesn't refer to that. And, I'm trying to keep the blinders on a little bit too in this environment here. So I'm just acknowledging it is interesting, and you're basically demanding the next step, even though it feels like we have to stay in our lane for a zone amendment plan amendment zone change.
Landwatch, we've done our best to respond to this application and how the hearings officer analyzed it, which is apparently all of the uses allowed. That's the intended use of the property for which a reasons exception to Goal 4 is sought. So, we're also trying to put our blinders on to conform with what the application says and how the hearing
Yeah,
officer,
or in the same spot.
addressed it. But when we look at the stated intent, which, as I noted, shows up in the hearings notice, I think it creates that confusion and prevents, true, accurate participation and discourse on whether the criteria for goal exception are met.
Well, and this is a de novo hearing, and we've heard from all the testimony. So good. Thank you for joining us.
Just one
Nope,
more,
there you go.
one more question about that. So, as discussed earlier, we're really looking at kind of multiple scenario pathways. There is the, approve and inclusion in the UGB pathway, scenario. There is the approve but not included in the immediate UGB expansion. There's the deny. I'm wondering if, okay, and this gets back into the discussion of cluster developments, which is something that we are not 100% certain we can even offer to land use applicants at this moment. But if a scenario was laid out that if a scenario was laid out, this is the urbanization vision. But if the property is not included in the urban growth boundary, here is a cluster scenario. Would that be more helpful in kind of considering the specific, potential impacts to to the forest, to goal 4, and to the forest uses, in order to be able to kind of, for Land Watch or others who are concerned about the forest, to be able to evaluate this proposal?
In a somewhat general sense, I agree with that. If there were a specific development proposal, it would be easier to comment on whether it meets the exception criteria. But we are limited to what the land use application before you says, and it doesn't offer those sorts of specifics.
Okay.
So I guess I'm hesitant to comment on something that is not before the commission today.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, so Mary Fleischman is next, and then we do have participation online, which we'll get to following.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Mary Fleischman, live at 61305 Camelot Place, Bend, Oregon. I'm here on behalf of the Central Oregon chapter of the Great Oak Broadsford Wilderness. Thanks for this opportunity to weigh in on this matter. I'm not going to get into a whole lot of stuff because that's not who I am. What can I say except here we are again looking at amendments and zone changes from forest to rural residential exception areas and from F2 to multiple use agriculture. This is unacceptable for a number of reasons, the biggest being wildfires and impacts of wildlife. The other concern is the proximity to the Tollgate subdivision, which is deep in the woods and highly susceptible to fires, which then would spread. If this project should move forward, how many fire-resistant ponderosa trees would be cut, which leads to drying underbrush, key to fire spreads. We know that the majority of fires are started by humans, so that lends to this location not being suitable for such a change. And whenever there's development, a whole lot of trees are cut down. The developers of Mackenzie Meadow Village would have you believe that this is a great needed project and a terrific addition to Sisters, with plans for 180 homes and 20 homes developed by First Story to provide affordable housing. These would be providing households earning less than the median income in the area. These homes also would be single-family homes with yards, as they say, that's what people want, instead of high-density development, such as the direction Bend has taken to avoid sprawl. The concern for not having high-density development is because that requires maximizing the usage of land on smaller lots and efficient development practices. This project is not going to deal with affordable housing, let alone assist the hundreds of houseless living in the Deschutes National Forest, whether seen or not seen. The median income in the area is $93,115 as of 2023. The cheapest apartment that Sisters offers is anything from $1,475 to $2,500 a month, not not counting additional costs, electric, water, HOAs, groceries, what have you. Those living unhoused, if they are working at best, making $15 an hour, there is no way they would be able to afford any of these homes offered. And as was already been mentioned, there is housing available, but again, you got to be able to afford it. It appears to me that once again, we are looking at exclusive housing with no regard for the protection of our forests and wildlife. This area also is used by the Sisters High School for environmental science classes and stewardship projects. This simply is not a good idea to make changes once again to the comprehensive plan. I hope that you will take my points into consideration in making your decision. I understand Sisters also is experiencing, as it's been, not a lot of housing, but I'm not sure that this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. So now online, I think there may be one or more people. If you can help us. Yep, okay. So Christina Meyer. So you may have been brought in as a participant, and if you unmute yourself, you can testify. Christina Meyer.
Thank you.
There we go.
Hi, I'm Christina Meyer, 69249 Lariat in Sisters. I'm opposed to the proposed rezoning. This rezoning request is premature and undermines the integrity of the ongoing urban growth boundary expansion process in Sisters. According to Oregon law, cities must evaluate land for UGB expansion in a specific order, starting with rural residential and exception lands first. The Mackenzie Meadows parcel is currently forest zoned and classified as priority 3, meaning it should only be considered after all higher priority lands have been exhausted. Approving the rezoning now would artificially advance this property ahead of others in the process and circumvent statewide planning goal 14. In fact, there are nearly 2,000 acres of priority 1 lands in the UGB study area, and Sisters is estimated to only need about 250 acres to accommodate the next 20 years of growth. Therefore, this rezoning is not necessary to meet our community's growth needs. The land lies within the wildland-urban interface, an area with significant wildfire risk. Increasing housing density here would put more people and first responders in harm's way and contradicts Deschutes County's wildfire resilience goals. The proposed development raises access and egress concerns with only 2 access points at the far south end of the property into neighborhood streets. This area is also further from jobs, services, and amenities, which could contribute to higher vehicle dependency and traffic congestion within the city. The property is resource land protected for its scenic corridor, forest, wildlife habitat, open space, and recreational values. A landowner's desire to jump the line and make their land higher priority for UGB inclusion does not justify a reasons exception to Goal 4. This kind of rezoning sets a dangerous precedent. If a developer can rezone forest land to improve their standing in the pending UGB expansion, it opens the door for similar speculative efforts, weakening our land use system and inviting sprawl. This request is an attempt to bypass the transparent UGB expansion process already underway and undermines our planning system, prioritizes developer convenience over wildfire safety, environmental stewardship, and fair public process. In fact, the very final meeting of the Sisters UGB Steering Committee just recently, they just voted to exclude the Mackenzie Meadows parcels. I urge you to protect our longstanding land use framework by denying this premature and speculative rezoning request. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Is there anyone else to request to speak on this matter? I see one more blue piece of paper maybe coming up. Okay, good. Yeah, so online Rima Gavad. Please let us know if you're in support or opposition online. And Rima, thank you for joining us. You may be brought in as a participant. Here we go. Thank you. Hello.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I wanted to first say thank you to the commissioners for hosting this hearing and listening to all the different perspectives. I am joining today first with high respect for the 3 families that are requesting the zone change. They have done so much for our community. However, I urge the county commissioners to deny this Goal 4 exception request. I want to recognize that affordable housing is desperately needed in our community. As a teacher, I am looking at the Mackenzie Meadows currently developed, and there are currently 6 houses for sale, and the cheapest one is $575,000. As a teacher on the current salary, I'm not able to buy any of those. If this is a representation of what the new proposed development will be, that is not affordable. I also recognize that the proposed land is not the only option to develop. Other lands have already been identified to develop over the last year in the surrounding Sisters area. This current land is forest and is more valuable to Oregonians and Deschutes County and the residents of Sisters as forest because it plays a key role in supporting wildlife resources, a healthy ponderosa forest that is connected to forest on 3 sides. It is critical to wildlife movement and migration, as has already been said, and it provides habitat to the sensitive species, the white-headed woodpecker, that draws people to this area from all over the world and adds support to the local economy. As has been stated already, Trout Creek flows through the property every year, and the creek routinely floods onto the proposed land. I'm curious if there has been any recognition of the flooding that occurs. As has been said, Pex penstemon grows in that area. According to studies that have been done, it grows up to 200 feet on either side of the creek. And so if the proposed area were to be developed, there would need to be a bigger buffer than 100 feet on each side of the creek to support the Pex penstemon. A vibrant population of Pex penstemon grows across the property and on either sides. And this plant, I want to remind you, only grows locally in the northwest part of Deschutes County and just a little into Jefferson County. And that's the only place this species lives in the world. This habitat needs to be protected. Developing the land is not compatible with the surrounding forest and the needs of the surrounding forest because it disrupts the continuous forest on 3 sides. And so it is in conflict with the Goal 4, as has already been stated. And I strongly urge you to deny the exception request. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Address.
Well, and thank you for joining us remotely, but Commissioner Adair is asking for.
Yes, you didn't give us your address.
I'm so sorry. 18557 McSwain Drive, Sisters.
McLean, was it?
McSwain.
McSwain, okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And was there anybody else online? Okay, seeing none, so Mr. Lee Lucas.
I'm going to take out my hearing aids so that I can hear whether I'm speaking loud enough. Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Lee Lucas. I reside at 69625 Pine Ridge Drive, just east of Sisters. I've been a property owner in Deschutes County for 36 years, and I've resided here since 1997. I must admit, this prepared statement sounded a lot better to me last night than after listening to all the testimony of people who know more than I do. I would like to address my objection from three perspectives. First, the legal perspective. I've read through all the material submitted by Central Oregon Land Watch and done a little digging online on ORS. And it seems to me there are two takeaways that I get. One is that if you approve this requested zoning change, you are likely violating longstanding county policy to protect forest lands in Deschutes County. Number two, you are also likely violating Oregon state land use laws. If this is approved, I expect it to be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board. The proposed rezoning appears to violate state land use laws insomuch as the applicant has not succeeded in establishing why the rules do not apply. The subject property contains riparian wetlands along Trout Creek. It protects rare flora and fauna and provides a wildlife migration corridor. County and state policy should be to protect such lands from residential inclusion. Second perspective is practical. We all know the purpose is to develop Mackenzie Meadows into about a 400 residential unit property. The fact is Mackenzie Meadows is not needed to satisfy projected growth in Sisters over the next 20 years. This I gather from the published reports of the Sisters UGB committee. In fact, my belief is they have voted recently with only one dissent not to include this property within the new UGB property. The proposed residential development would be incompatible with adjacent land uses. We've heard about that. And a substantial number of Sisters area residents oppose this proposed development.
Time to wrap up.
Excuse me?
Time to wrap up.
Okay. I am completely sympathetic with the need for affordable housing. And if the 30% affordable housing were indeed affordable, there might be a way to work with the City of Sisters to make it happen. I would encourage the landowners and the Sisters city government to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in opposition? Or anyone else neutral on this application? So last call for testimony on this item. So at this time, applicant rebuttal. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair DeBonne, Commissioners Chang and Adair. Chris Kobeck again. I do have a couple things to say. First, with respect to the threshold issue that Landwatch raised, the case, if you read their material, the case they cited does not stand for the proposition, nor does it state that you have to come in on a goal exception with a specific development plan. The issue there was whether you could take a reasons exception for general urban. There was a question whether it was an exception for an urban uses in general or rural uses. And all Luba said is you got to pick one of those horses. There wasn't a specific development plan required. And that would be inconsistent with the statute. ORS 197732 is the goal exception statute. And it defines an exception as a comprehensive plan provision, including an amendment to an acknowledged plan that is applicable to specific properties or situations that does not establish a planning zoning policy of general applicability and does not comply with some or all of the goal requirements applicable to the subject properties or situations. So the plain language of the statute allows an applicant like us to come in without a specific development proposal. And as Chair DeBonne noted, that's kind of out of step with the whole system. You have to, what would we propose, not knowing what the ultimate zone is? So we can't really give a specific proposal. Now, having said that, I just want to reiterate that because we are asking for a goal exception, as the hearings officer found in his footnote and the regulations appear to allow, if the commission felt strongly that some uses were just not appropriate under that goal exception, you have the discretion to condition the approved goal exception on not having those. That's, I think, as far as it goes on specific uses. The reason we didn't include a UGB expansion request in this is very simple. Again, it goes to, we're respecting the city process. And we want to continue to respect that process. We are not sidestepping, as Ms. Meyer said, we're not trying to go outside of the recognized process. Everything MMV has done has been open and following the process that is given to us by our laws. As far as the 2,000 acres, of the exception land that exists, we've went through this in detail at the hearings officer level, and his decision reflects that our information was valid. There are maps that show how restricted. There's many limitations on those 2,000 acres. A lot of it's in floodplains and topographically constrained. A lot of it has, all of it, I think, or virtually all of it, or most of it, has legal restrictions that prevent the future development of that property. As somebody said here, you'd have to go through a process of condensing. First, you have to assemble property. You have to assume that a bunch of owners will come together and put their 5 to 10 acre parcels together. Then you'd have to get 75% of all of the owners in these communities to vote to allow development different than what they already have. We've presented evidence that all or most of those properties have expensive improvements on them. So you'd be asking people not only assemble their properties, remove all the restrictions, eliminate their nice homes and other buildings to facilitate future housing. That was all looked at, and they're just not reasonably available. And that's the test. Can they reasonably accommodate the use? Not could they ever. They someday, maybe in 20, 30 years. But I think what we've heard from everybody here today, Mr. Hoover, Mr. Knopp, Mr. Greenwood, we don't have forever. Lastly, on the UGB expansion committee, they didn't decide or vote to exclude MMV's property from the process. Their final meeting, unfortunately, was a week or 8 days before this hearing. And understandably, the committee had to conclude its business, not knowing what the vote in this process would be. So the committee did vote to proceed to the Planning Commission with a recommended alternative that does not include the MMV property. That is not a binding decision by the city. In fact, you've seen from the city council itself the support for this process. And so although the committee was in an awkward position, they did what they did, a vote today in our favor will allow us to go to the actual decision makers at the city with an alternative that they like. And so again, on behalf of my client, we appreciate your time, your attention, all the questions you got. It's clear you care and you want to make the right decision. We think the right decision is to approve the request for a comprehensive plan designation change and approve our zone change. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question. In one of the letters from a Miss Sue Yoakum, she said that this project would be blocking the fire exit to Tollgate. And looking at one of our maps in our file, it doesn't look like we're even close to having that situation. I just wondered if you have any feedback on that.
As far as I know, Tollgate does not have any fire access easement through this property. So I'm a little, I don't really know how to answer that. But I guess I could say this, if the property were developed in the future under MUA 10, I've been practicing land use for a long time here, and I think it would be very appropriate as a condition to our development to say, you've got to connect a fire access road to Tollgate. So I would think that a future development consistent with MUA 10 here would actually provide a little bit better emergency access to the Tollgate residents, because not only would they have whatever access they have now, but they would have a road through the MUA 10 property.
Right. And we do want to commend Sisters for their standards, that they are first in the state, I believe, to really make building on a much higher and, fireproof level. So I appreciate them.
Thank you very much.
I have another question, and this may be a question for staff as much as for the applicant, but Mr. Kobach has put forward the idea that we could limit uses or condition uses, to address things like scenic or habitat or floodplain concerns. One of the concerns that was raised during the public comments was about this affordability commitment. I have heard from the applicants a very passionate verbal commitment to making 30% of the units in this development, if the ultimate vision is realized, affordable. I'm wondering if that is something that could be included, as a condition or as some kind of a commitment in I guess it would probably be the decision, the decision document for this application. Anyone from staff or from the applicant, able to address that? I mean, can you make those kinds of commitments in a decision document?
Well, I think you can agree to conditions. I know you can agree to conditions as an applicant. I'd like to answer a little bit broader first and then kind of get in. So the 30% affordable is a commitment that my client has made, but they've made it into the city. And how it would work in our vision is, if this application were approved and if the city put the property back into its mix, evaluated it, we think they would come to the right decision, that what we think is the right decision, included in the UGB. It would be zoned city, and we would have to enter into an annexation agreement with the city. And in that annexation agreement is where, and I think I do a lot of work here in Bend, and that's where they put in those restrictive covenants, 30%. So, but to answer your specific question, my client has already said to the city, if our vision comes through and we get through the county process and everything else happens the way we hope, we will sign that agreement committing to 30%. Now, the question I think staff might be better able to answer is, within the county's framework, could the county put a condition that says, if we approve your zone change and you're included in the city's UGB, will you agree to a 30%? I'm telling you, my client would gladly accept that condition. I just don't know if your staff believes that they can do it.
Yeah. I mean, seems like we're getting pretty far away from the land use decision to be made right now. Right. But I mean, I do think that in terms of, community concerns, that the concern that was raised, well, is this going to be like MMV1, how do you address that concern is basically the question I'm asking it. And I believe that you are, that the applicants are sincere about 30%, deed restricted, tagged to certain area median incomes. And, I guess just the question is, where do you put that commitment? And the annexation agreement, I would be comfortable with that as a place where you to formalize or codify that commitment.
That has been offered to the city, and I highlighted something I did want to comment on, is that is the MMV1 that had a 10% commitment in their agreement, and my clients said that's not enough. They're the ones who said we need more, because, as you know, just reality is, if you're developing a large number of residences, you, as a developer, you can't make it work if you have 100% affordable because you go bankrupt. So there's this percentage where you got to put some in, but you need some market rate too. And there's also a need for market rate. So there are a lot of market rates in MMV1 and 10% affordable. My client's committed to increasing that percentage because they understand that if we're going to get to where we need to go as a society, 10% is not enough. 30% you can make it pencil, and you can still have a much bigger impact on the demand.
Right. So if we wanted to track MMV's performance on its prior commitments to affordable housing, you could go look up those 10% of the units, see the deed restriction in place, track what the most recent sales prices were, and what, and actually project what they would be if they were put back on the market today.
I believe all that data is available, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is Jen Kovitz, for the record. I'm do community engagement and government affairs with Hayden Homes, and applicant Bill Willits asked me to come to the table. Hayden Homes built Mackenzie Meadows, the neighborhood that was mentioned during testimony. And I just want to share that we have a letter of intent between Hayden Homes and Mackenzie Meadows Village, reiterating this commitment to 30%. And we are using Oregon Senate Bill 1537's definition of affordability. So for the record, that's 130% AMI and below for home ownership and 80% AMI and below for rental. And again, that is a direct reflection of the 2024 Senate Bill 1537's definition of affordable.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jen, for those facts.
Am I done?
I do. I have one more question.
Let's see.
I think Mr. Lucas said, Lee said 400 units. Where would he have gotten that number? 400 units. I mean, okay, so let's pretend like, oh, we've gone through this and now we're going we're going to actually add homes and affordable homes in our county, which we are clearly lacking because we just had an event yesterday with, it took over 9 years and the houses probably won't be ready until maybe another year or two. So it seems like, we need them. It takes forever, but what is the ideal number of homes that somebody has thought of for this project? Just because I want to know.
I don't know that.
But is it 400 though?
I believe it to be close to that number. A mix of detached, some attached, and some apartments, I think, have been contemplated. But again, until we get through this process, and then really until we get through the city process, there are concepts, and the concepts show, I think, in that area of 350 to 400 housing units in this property. But you got to deduct 15% or so for streets, and so there's a lot more work that goes into figuring out your overall end product. But based on just the raw density numbers that we believe will be applied to it if the city were to bring it in, it's in that 400 mark.
Okay, so the project we were at yesterday, it was 39.31 acres, and they're going to do, I believe, approximately 458 apartment buildings and cottages, et cetera. So
you can get more if you do apartments, and the vision here is to have a lot of quite a bit of single family home ownership because it's what the community market demands. And that's
it's better for the wildlife. So they can eat your flowers. Don't forget.
They do.
They love them.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, so we have had the public hearing on this matter, and we'll talk about the next steps. We have options of continuing, closing oral and leaving written record open, close the hearing, schedule deliberation. So it's all kind of standard.
There's a
Oh,
hand up.
yep, sorry.
There.
Yes.
Was Did you fill out a blue form?
So yeah, we very procedurally and orderly the whole process, and now you're standing up right after we're finishing.
I'm the chair of the UGB steering committee in Sisters, and I heard several comments dropping in at the end that spoke about what happened at the.
Well, yeah. So I'm procedurally. How do we work with this now? If somebody can help me. Because I can see you're ready to talk now, but as I say, we just went through a very orderly process about having people involved.
from the chair of the UGB steering committee to just speak.
Well, and you've been here the whole time, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right at the end about what happened.
Well, and yeah, the applicant had the rebuttal process, so that's why I'm hesitant to ask you to engage at this point, because, I mean, we very specifically, and the procedural can be appealed. That's why I'm hesitant to engage right now. But yeah, give us a moment. Okay. thank you.
Procedurally, would it be allowed
Yeah.
to let the chair of the city's UGB committee basically recap what actually happened at that meeting?
Thank you, commissioners. Because you've engaged in a process and because the applicant has the right of a final rebuttal, you would be reopening the public hearing to, those parties and then affording the applicant an additional rebuttal to that period. As an alternative, and what's commonly offered is in the event that there's a post-hearing period, and frequently there are associated fees, that could be entered into the written record for any clarifications that anyone had or concerns they had with the applicant's rebuttal testimony, to which they don't get a additional rebuttal unless you reopen the hearing generally and afford again a second rebuttal to the applicant.
So as I say, I mean, we're right at the end of this. We're here on the floor right now, so we're not too bad. It was just the awkward moment. Applicant, I would engage with right now. So we have somebody that's interested in speaking on the subject. Sounds like, we're trying to hold the blinders for a plan amendment and zone change. And we're, the UGB discussion keeps coming in. So any thoughts from the applicant?
Well, who's here representing us legally? So.
Chair DeBonne, I responded to somebody's testimony about the steering committee. I rebutted that. That was proper. So I really don't feel that, having gotten this far and followed the steps, that it's appropriate to do it. But if I'm given additional rebuttal and you want to hear from the chair of the steering committee, I think you can make that decision.
What does it say? So I would acknowledge that, yeah, rebuttal would be offered. So that's right where I'm at here.
Yeah,
As I say, it's
feel
maybe the
that
next.
testimony is helpful to you. We're here to get the best decision.
Yep.
We want you to have the.
So any thoughts?
The applicant also asked us to kind of proceed to deliberations right away today. So I mean, I wouldn't, it would be helpful to me to hear just kind of a recap of the meeting and offer the applicant an opportunity to rebut if there's anything that they
that's what
feel
I'm
needs
seeing
to be rebutted.
Support that, Commissioner.
Definitely.
Good. Okay. So that was just procedural. It
Spoke
wasn't
with
not.
legal, and I believe we can
Yeah.
do this, can we not, Kim?
Oh, yeah.
Provided by staff and also by applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll provide rebuttal. Okay. So, yeah, please join us. As I say, that was purely procedural. It wasn't not wanting to hear from you. It was procedure of the hearing.
My name is Therese Kohler, 1190 Jansen Court and Sisters. And as I mentioned, I'm the chair of the UGB Steering Committee and Sisters. And I wanted to first start by acknowledging that the team of MMV have done an excellent job in pursuing their vision of what they want to do with their land. And we have heard from them the entire process of the steering committee. The reason I am speaking up now is because there were misrepresentations, I thought, of how the steering committee's decision came to be. And also to mention that it was omitted from anyone's opening remarks and only brought up by somebody online that we had come to a decision after working more than a year very carefully on this whole UGB amendment process and considering carefully the MMV lands, which do score very high in many ways. However, early on, we were willing and we requested the City of Sisters to send the letter to you. Let's get this thing decided so we can either include it or not in our decisions. As time progressed, that evolved to people realizing there are other ways to get to affordable housing quickly, and there is so much delay that could happen if you do approve it even today. There will likely be an appeal. Who knows how long that can go on? This all translates into Sisters being stalled. We discussed many things. I don't need to talk about them all, but there are possibly future land swaps to get them in later if that's how things play out. There's a possible urban growth reserve that could be pursued by Sisters. We could have kept Sisters UGB committee going. It was not a hard and fast rule that had to be the last meeting. If now, by fast forward, you approve, City of Sisters has told me we will have to open it back up to the public and Sisters to discuss because we didn't go deep into MMV. It's all going to be delay, delay, delay. If you really want to get affordable housing in Sisters ASAP, you know, I think we're conflating decisions. I'm not making any comment on whether you rezone this or not on environmental or anything. I'm just saying, know that the UGB steering committee got long and hard and voted twice their last for the sake of Sisters
Moving forward. Got it.
Thank
you very much. Okay, well, thank you for doing, yeah, please provide any rebuttal as digested by what we just heard, but thank you very much for getting engaged. Just procedural.
I don't have a lot. I think my recollection of the meeting was about the same. We addressed the land swap. It's a long process, very arduous and unlikely. But what I want to say is a decision here to rezone would be actually helpful to that, I think. So that doesn't really sway it at all. And I'll tell you what I said to the committee last Tuesday. If you're looking to meet a demand, and they are a recognized demand for housing, needed housing, I think you shouldn't be guided only by the fear of an appeal. Because as we know in this room, this is a process in Oregon that has appeals. You don't get in a land use as an applicant, a decision maker, or an attorney for one of the parties without the realization that there are likely to be appeals in rezones and UGB expansions. They are just the nature of the animal. There is going to be appeals. And I told him, you should look at the best property rather than let fear of an appeal guide, because if they approve their UGB without McKinsey Meadows, there's just as likelihood that there's going to be an appeal of that decision. So that's what I told him then, and that's what I firmly believe today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, now we got to a hearings process, an oral hearing today. It's time for us as a board to kind of make some decisions about where we may want to proceed. The applicant did mention a request to step towards deliberations. Any thoughts?
No, I'd be comfortable deliberating now.
First.
There we go. Okay, so we're getting there. So that would close the oral and written portion of this hearing, this de novo hearing, with the input of the hearing today and the hearings officer decision that was provided as input to this. And there's support for deliberations at this time. On your marks, get set, go. So I've said my piece about, kind of wanting to put the blinders on here. So then you get back to the 58 acres. Just a couple thoughts and we'll maybe hand it back and forth here. The plat that showed the 3 parcels that are basically out there and the road, the right of way that's out there already, is a foundation for me to get started thinking that, well, this was either conditional use under this forest zone, could be, parcels out there, they're already platted in a couple of parcels. So what is the next step? So I'm just saying that's how I got started thinking, oh, maybe opportunity to move forward with something here.
Well, as I've expressed along the way, my first and foremost concerns with the goal for exception, you know, when we're talking about the forest values would, well, not just the goal for exception, but my concerns, my, you know, initial concerns about the proposal are, you know, the scenic corridor, the riparian corridor, the creek corridor, and the you know, the habitat connectivity, you know, maintaining contiguous forest all the way from the Trout Creek management area into the federal lands. I do believe that the applicant could address those by making certain kinds of commitments in a in a decision document. You know, some of the other concerns that were raised during the public comment that I just want to respond to are the fire concern, that you know, essentially we have wildland urban interface expansion concerns anywhere that the city of Sisters wants to grow into. In fact, you know, the much maligned state wildfire hazard maps that have been repealed at this point showed that, you know, this end of the city of Sisters was only moderate hazard, while the other end of the city of Sisters, you know, out into the east is high hazard. And I think one of the reasons for that is that the forests have been treated to a significant degree by the Forest Service in the lands to the west and south of the city of Sisters. While to the east, we have, you know, we have different vegetation types, and you know, anyone who has fought fire understands that fire moves much faster in rangeland areas than it does in forested areas. So it moves faster, you know, that it doesn't have the fuel mass to get as, you know, to have, you know, 50-foot tall flames, but it moves a lot faster and it can be very dangerous. So, you know, to people who are saying, you know, this is the wrong place to for the city to grow in terms of fire concerns, I just say that there's no place for the city to grow that is a good place for it to grow. And, you know, in some ways, this is actually a less of a fire concern. I mean, we are already committed, you know, thinking about a fire suppression response, we are already committed in that area with Tollgate, with schools. You know, you know, firefighters will be throwing everything that they have at a fire coming from the south or from the west. So that you know, I wanted to address that concern. There was a concern about about efficient use of land, which, you know, is a really major concern for me. And you know, hearing about the anticipated number of units, 350 to 400 in 58 acres, you know, and any land being brought into an urban growth boundary being held to essentially the density standards of the city, you know, that the city is responsible to the state for, you know, addresses those concerns for me. I think that, you know, we're not going to get, you know, you're not going to get, you know, apartment building after apartment building after apartment building in this development, but there's a density that is, you know, essentially a density that is envisioned that is significantly higher than single family zoning. I also wanted to respond to the concern about rezones on the edge of the urban growth boundary that are done with the intent to come into the urban growth boundary. Folks in Sisters may not have been tracking this, but we have seen hundreds of acres on the edge of the city of Bend rezoned in the last few years in order to set those areas up for consideration for inclusion in an urban growth boundary. Now, in many of those cases, it's it was done many years in advance of an urban growth boundary expansion process instead of, almost simultaneous with that process. But it is not it's not a novel thing for landowners on the edge of the urban growth boundary to want to seek prioritization for consideration by pursuing a rezone. And I have been I'll tell people I've been sympathetic to some of those rezones right on the edge of the urban growth boundary of the city of Bend, because they are more ideal places for expansion of the city, from various perspectives: topography, infrastructure access, not already built out at RR10 densities or MUA 10 densities, which would inhibit in a lot of ways the urbanization of those areas, which we've seen inside the already incorporated areas in the southeast corner of the city of Bend. That's a major concern of mine for the urban growth boundary expansion. So yeah, I just wanted to address some of those broader concerns about urban growth boundary expansion and where are the most appropriate places for a city to grow to, before winding back to the application at hand, and saying again that in a decision document that addressed the scenic corridor, the riparian corridor, and the floodplain area, and that that the associated habitat with that, and habitat connectivity overall, particularly on the north end of the property. I would view that favorably. I think I would be comfortable with that goal. The intent of goal four had been met, and if the goal 4 exception is kind of what this approval hinges upon, then I would be comfortable with a goal 4 exception with those commitments or provisions.
Thank you. Commissioner?
Okay, so I think I'm remembering back that we have what, 1,200,000 plus acres of forested land in Deschutes County. I know we have 250,000 EFU lands that are privately owned, and then about 450,000 that are owned by the government. So, we're talking 58 acres. And what I find fascinating is that it is right next to the line, where we're not talking about Tollgate. And how the heck did Tollgate and Crossroads get confirmed? What were those in the 70s when they did that? Thank you, Peter, for that nod. Yeah, I know. I was like going, to me, this seems like a natural addition to Sisters. Wherever you go, it's going to be an issue, a question. It seems that, on one hand, we're hearing that we need the, 17,000 houses in the next so many years, but it's always a fight. And so there's those two sides, the people that are here and they're, no, you can't do any more. And yet we have the need, and we have the affordable need, and the fact that the long-term commitment of the 3 partners is really significant. Their transparency, what they want to accomplish. I find it, there has to be some goodness in the world, and I would recognize their goal. Hearing from Habitat today, I really so appreciate that they have such a long track record, and they've done 81 homes, and to think that they're going to do another 40, but they need to do more. So, and it's honestly a drop in the bucket. I will not forget that last year Rooted Homes only had 1 application for their home. They wanted to do 2 for the school system, and only 1 teacher was able to actually purchase one of the Rooted Homes. So we definitely need more housing. And it's really unfortunate to hear that we had a principal candidate that couldn't come into Sisters. I know Sisters really prides themselves on their excellent school system. And then the other thing is where they're thinking of moving to, that's over by the airport. And I'm thinking like the airport is a bit the pride and joy of Sisters. I know the high school has a great program there. And I think wherever they want to go, there's going to be challenges. So I don't know, going 200 feet on each side of the creek, perhaps that's not going to be that significant in the 58-acre plan. I don't know. Haley, do you have any idea on that? I mean, is 200 feet on each side? Is there really a floodplain there that somebody was referring to, even though it's not designated as such for us?
Yeah, a great question, Commissioner Dare. Again, is the code provisions, both forest and MUA require the 100-foot setback. If and when this property were to be developed, likely some additional wetland mapping would be required to delineate the actual extent of Trout Creek and its riparian corridor. So it's difficult to, I guess, say at this point the actual extent of that area, but certainly with, if that's something that the board is looking at, that's not off the table as part of any decision. But yeah, certainly a site-specific wetland delineation would be required if and when this were to be subdivided or developed.
And the other, talking about wildfire, honestly, yes, the mapping had this part of Sisters moderate, but when I drive to Salem and I see the homeless campers out there and you hear the statistics that who's been to date starting the fires in Oregon, and it's been people. So I think that needs to be acknowledged.
So, yeah, and I can support this application, and we maybe need to get down to the fact that do we accept the hearings officer decision, or do we look for an adapted version of this from Commissioner Chang's decisions here? A couple thoughts. This is the goal exception process for a zone change plan amendment. For the UGB process, this does, as they say, stepping out of the plan amendment zone change world, but this does seem like a good fit for what's going on in the area. So I don't know that that's part of the decision per se, the black and white of the words on the decision, but it does look like it's a good fit. And during the work session is where I had the vision, or, after studying it just enough, it came to me that, it's basically blocked in already. Public lands, conservation lands, the top corner of it. Commissioner Chang's talking about some of that, but it's just one step. After this, there's nothing else to do out that in that direction for the city of Sisters. So that really kind of works. It is 50 acres, 58 acres, and a couple parcels at 10 acres, or 5, 6 at 10 acres, or UGB expansion. The acknowledgement is yes, something will happen on these properties. That's the goal of this. Either way, yeah, I don't need to say anything else there. So as I say, it kind of boils down to, do we want to accept a hearings officer decision or step into the applicant would adapt a decision in support of what we've been through today with, some of the feedback.
Well, just to reemphasize, the hearings officer made a recommendation. The decision is ours.
I'm just referring to the work product. Yep.
And like I said, I would be comfortable approving a decision document that included the, enhanced protections for the scenic corridor, forest connectivity, and Trout Creek. And without those additional protections, I'm not sure if I would be comfortable voting in favor of an application approval.
So each one of those topics are, something that probably the applicant and I can support here. It's just, do we put it in hard words, and can we even put it in hard words for a decision? So as I say, there's not a lot of resistance there, but what do those words look like? Thoughts, Commissioner? Or yeah.
Those are things that I think should be fairly easy to put into formal commitments in a decision document, things like the 30% affordability, that's much more difficult. But, those are direct kind of, those things speak directly to the goal for values under consideration here.
I guess maybe it boils down to the, a scenic corridor, a scenic overlay, and we've been through this before. The intention is to be compatible, and I support the words of our code and the intention of our code already. So I wouldn't see having to put something in there. When it comes to the floodplain, it's a defined area already, right? Water flows here through here sometimes. How wide
But
we
it wasn't really that defined, I think, is what we were.
Yeah, so then, but how do you put words in there that says you shall do your delineation in the future, which we're already going to do anyways? So that's exactly what I'm referring to. We already have checks and balances in the system that are going to bring these topics up. So then we put belts and
Right.
suspenders on it in words.
All we have is a 100-foot riparian setback. And we have heard, through the testimony today about the significant values, the habitat values and other things that exist in that floodplain riparian corridor area that beyond 100 feet. And also the scenic corridor is one thing, but on the north end of the property again is that key opportunity to connect the Forest Service forest lands with the 160 acres of Trout Creek management area, which then connects to the Forest Service lands to the southeast. So I mean, if we are trying to create contiguous forest, a continuous forest corridor for wildlife to migrate through, for scenic and recreational values, then that is not something that is covered by the scenic overlay conditions.
I'm just trying to give guidance to the conclusion of this process.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there was comfort with, allowing the applicant to come back, to basically go and develop a decision, a draft decision language, which, included the kinds of commitments I've outlined, then I think that could conclude the process and give direction. It seemed like what was in question was whether we were going to move forward with the hearings officer's recommendation as written, or whether we were going to do something different.
Well, but then we're maybe in the spot where there's a lot of work put into trying to come up with words that are your intention that I think is going too far. So I'm just trying to work that out a little bit before we send a bunch of people down to do work. And then I'm thinking, well, I'll still support it if there's less than that in there. So I'm just trying to work it out a little bit as we step through here. It's exciting that we're kind of on the same page as a starting point, but now what's the final product going to look like?
Yeah, I don't think we're on the same page at the starting point. We're talking about two different decisions. And if you're indicating that you would not support the kind of decision document that I'm asking for, then we can vote on it.
Please, Will.
Commissioners, and looking at legal counsel as I brainstorm a little bit here, is that it sounds like you have a broad direction of support for the hearings officer's decision with some concerns, some specific concerns. Were you to vote in favor of this application, the applicant as the prevailing party has the right to draft this decision. And just checking for a nod that they'd like to do that. Nod seen. So I'm wondering if you could vote to give instructions that you would like to see a decision from, produced that acknowledged the hearings officer's decision, but also included something like modular findings and conditions with regard to some of the things that Commissioner Chang had raised, and we could bring that back to you as a decision document. At that point, you would be engaged in additional deliberation, but you could have specific examples of kind of two decisions that you might approach. Does that seem like something that would be feasible, provided that we acknowledge that the second stage was additional deliberation?
I that would be supportive. I'd be supportive of that approach.
Okay, yeah. So we would have proposed final decision versions that could be kind of get to the clarity of what we're trying to talk about right now. As I say, all three of those topics are fine, but I just worry that it's going to get locked in and a step before it even really goes to that other step, which might be associated with the city of Sisters UGB, which is not part of this decision. That's all.
We can give the green light for the applicant to come back with two different draft decisions and deliberate further then.
Yeah, good. Any other thoughts on that?
Yes, I do think that the landscape zone is, I wouldn't want to put any more restrictions on them. They just have that one teeny corner. And when I see that all the homeless people have moved out, and when I do my drive to Salem, then that will make me a lot happier. We keep putting restrictions on people that are trying to do the right thing for families. And yet, you know, we have issues in our county that are not really, they're putting all of us on a powder keg if and when we have a fire out in that community and there's a wind, then that's really, that's a dangerous situation. So the wind always will change the dynamics. But when you have so many homeless out there, it's really quite overwhelming.
So thank you very much for that proposed solution. That's going to really help. So now I do have another note about habitat connectivity, because I envision that as kind of diagonal connectivity from forest land and the north, the kind of the northeast to the southwest. Thinking of the map here right now, I think that's what we're talking about. But then there's also the discussion of a connectivity possibly with an access point to Tollgate, which I think crosses that directly. As I say, this is just visionary statements from the maps that we've been looking at here. So that's another aspect of it. I don't know that would come in right now, but just, it's habitat connectivity and a road that connects, that would be a future.
Holly, do their property lines actually abut each other?
Yeah, the well house that's the kind of notched out of the north west corner is owned by the toll gate.
Okay.
But the actual homes, again, that well house property is sort of the buffer between the actual homes and the subject property.
Yeah. So just acknowledge
There's all kinds of examples of places where there's an egress road that would only be used in an emergency situation that's otherwise closed, and that's not inconsistent with having a habitat corridor.
Yeah, it's just mentioning it, not designing a solution there, just mentioning that was discussed. Okay, so basically, deliberations concluded for today with the intention of looking at, from the discussion and input today, looking at versions of a final decision to be voted on.
Just procedurally, is there a motion, do they need to make a motion, the commissioners, for?
So we have done that in the past because the media will ask, did it get approved or not? So that's the reason that's happened in the past, is it isn't clear.
Yeah, no, I would go ahead and do a motion approving the application with subject to final deliberations to be continued.
Final decision.
Okay. Approve the project, bringing to be brought back with, our final deliberations, but approving the project.
Subject to additional deliberations when we see some draft decision documents.
Right.
I'll second
Yes.
that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any other discussion? Seeing none, Commissioner Dare?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes. Thank you very much. A little bit of clarity for today, and we're going to work together and to get this landed.
Thank you.
Find the agenda. So we do have executive session today, but at this time for other items, it's anything else for this meeting, other items? Nick, anything specifically? Yeah, I don't, just other than the calendar, we were at the groundbreaking yesterday at in Redmond. National Night Out in Redmond, Bend, and Lapine. So I was at Lapine last night. Had a really great event there with public safety, and it was the sheriff's office, but ODOT was there, Mid-State Electric was there, the helicopter, Life Flight was there, fire district was there. So really well attended by a lot of community members in Lapine's National Night Out. And I know that was happening in Bend and in Redmond also last night.
And sisters.
Oh, good. And Sisters, sorry. I just heard about the other ones. I didn't know the Sisters were doing it too. So, okay, anything else? $1 today, College View Apartments. We're still going to be able to make that pretty comfortably.
I have a 2-minute break.
Yeah. So anything else, Commissioner Chang?
No.
Okay, so at this time, you take a break. We'll get into an executive session.
The Deschutes County Board of Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.660 subsection 2E, which allows the board to meet in order to discuss real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made, and at the conclusion, we will open the doors and invite the audience back to the meeting.
Okay, so here we go, executive session. So at this time, we're back from an executive session. Please proceed as discussed. Is there anything for this board meeting? Anything else? Seeing none, meeting adjourned.